Hi guys, and welcome to Bedtime Stories from History. Tonight we step into a winter settlement where the wind presses against raw timber walls, snow whispers across the ground, and every breath turns pale in the darkness. You stand at the edge of a clearing with stiff fingers, damp boots, and the uneasy sense that the night is much larger than the little cabin waiting ahead. The cold does not merely surround you, it searches for openings, slipping beneath doors, through roof seams, and around your collar. You probably won't survive this if your grand plan is simply to curl up under one thin blanket and hope for the best. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while the fire catches, tell everyone where you're listening from, and what the local time is where you are. Now, dim the lights and follow the narrow path toward shelter. You trudge through snow that reaches above your ankles, each step making a dry crunch. There is only wind, wood smoke, and the faint orange pulse of firelight leaking through shutters. Beyond the final row of stumps, the land stretches pale and open. Snowdrifts gather in long ridges, shaped by air currents that settlers learn to read almost as carefully as tracks in mud. A badly placed cabin can become a trap for cold, while a better placed one can borrow protection from a hill, trees, or another building. Your gloves are rough wool. They itch and hold moisture badly, but they are better than bare skin. Your coat is heavy, patched, and carries the sour scent of smoke. When you pull open the cabin door, it resists because snow has gathered against the threshold. The hinges complain. A gust follows you inside as if invited. The room is dim and crowded. A low fire burns in a stone hearth. Smoke hangs near the rafters, making your eyes sting. Someone has boiled onions, grain, or salted meat, and the smell lingers beneath ash. Damp stockings steam near the fire. A wooden spoon rests in a bowl, and a small dog has chosen the warmest floorboard with the confidence of a creature that contributes very little, but understands comfort perfectly. Early settlers in many cold regions relied on fire, layered clothing, shared body heat, and compact rooms to endure winter nights. Survival rarely comes from one clever invention. It comes from many small protections working together, each imperfect, each buying a little more time. You extend your hands toward the hearth. Heat touches your palms while your back remains cold. The fire does not warm the room evenly. It creates a small island of comfort surrounded by colder corners. Water near the wall may freeze while a pot near the hearth simmers. The family watches the flames with practical attention. Fuel is not infinite. Every log represents labor. Someone has cut it, split it, hauled it, stacked it, and kept it dry. Burning too much now may leave too little for the later hours. When the cold deepens and nobody wishes to go outside with an axe, bedtime becomes a calculation. How much wood remains? How strong is the wind? Is the roof holding? Are the animals sheltered? Is anyone coughing? Will the fire last until midnight? The questions settle over the room as quietly as ash. A woman checks the latch and presses folded cloth into a gap near the door. A child covers a crack in the wall. An older man shifts the embers together so they burn slowly rather than flare. Their movements are familiar and unhurried. Panic wastes energy. Routine preserves it. One quirky tidbit from frontier life is that ordinary household objects often became bed warmers. A flat iron, heated stone, or brick might be wrapped in cloth and placed near the feet. It sounds charming until you remember that scorching the bedding is not especially restful. Still, warmth at the toes can transform an unbearable bed into a merely unpleasant one, which counts as progress. You glance toward the sleeping area. The bed may be a wooden frame tightened with rope, a straw-filled sack on boards, or a pallet near the hearth. Blankets are precious. Feathers are useful. Furs, quilts, woven covers, and spare clothing may all join the pile. Nothing is wasted if it can block a draft. Historians still argue whether some written accounts exaggerate the misery of early winter settlements to emphasize courage, divine trial, or national identity. Diaries describe terrible cold, but memory and storytelling shape every record. Even so, thin walls, limited fuel, damp clothing, and severe weather require little exaggeration. Outside, the wind rises and brushes loose snow against the cabin. It sounds like sand thrown softly at the wall. The shutters tremble. The dog lifts its head, decides history can manage without assistance, and returns to sleep. You scrape snow from your boots. The leather is stiff, your socks are damp, and the skin beneath them feels numb, then prickly as it warms. Numbness can hide injury. Settlers learn to inspect fingers and toes, change wet layers when possible, and watch one another for confusion or unusual drowsiness. They may not understand cold injury in modern medical terms, but experience teaches patterns. A person who becomes strangely quiet or careless in bitter weather is not simply tired. The body is losing its fight. The room darkens as the fire settles. Supper is finished. Bowls are scraped clean. Water is saved. The door remains shut because every opening steals heat. Conversation lowers, partly from fatigue and partly because winter encourages economy in everything. Even words. You sit close enough to feel the fire on your knees, behind you. The wall gives a faint creak. Above, roof timbers answer the wind with slow groans. Yet the people around you barely react. They know the difference between an ordinary complaint and a warning. That knowledge is perhaps the most important blanket in the room. You're not sleeping through winter because the cabin defeats the cold. It does not. Wind still enters. Frost may form inside. The water bucket may skin over with ice by morning. You sleep because the household prepares, adjusts, watches, and shares. You sleep because someone wakes to tend the embers. You sleep because the bed is placed away from the worst draught. Wool, straw, feathers, smoke, mud, and patience form a fragile alliance. Soon you will learn why this cabin stands where it does, and how the land itself becomes the first wall against the storm, for now. You listen as snow moves across the clearing, gathering in darkness, searching for every exposed corner of the settlement. You remain near the doorway for a moment, listening to the storm move around the cabin, and then your first tension shifts outward, beyond the walls, toward the land that made this small pocket of shelter possible. Before a settler raises a roof or stacks a single log, there is a quieter task. You must decide where the building belongs. That choice begins with the wind. You step back into the clearing at first light, when the sky's a pale wash of grey and the snow reflects more brightness than warmth. The cold presses against your cheeks. Your breath drifts sideways instead of upward. Giving you the first clue, air moves across the open ground in a steady stream, bending dry grass and lifting loose powder into thin ribbons. A sensible builder watches before acting. Where does the snow gather? Which trees lean? Which side of a hill feels calmer? Where does smoke from an existing chimney travel before it disappears? These details matter because winter wind steals warmth quickly. A cabin standing alone on an exposed rise may offer a fine view, but a fine view does not tuck blankets around you at midnight in cold climates. Settlers commonly preferred sheltered ground near wood, water and workable soil, balancing protection with practical needs. A site too distant from a stream creates exhausting chores. A site too close to low wet ground may bring flooding, dampness, and heavier frost. You walk toward the edge of the trees. The sound changes immediately. Out in the clearing, the wind speaks in one long voice, among trunks. It breaks into softer murmurs. Branches click above you. Snow rests unevenly around roots. showing where gusts slow and where they funnel between obstacles. A belt of trees can reduce wind speed, though it may also create turbulence if the cabin sits too close. Settlers may not describe the effect with modern engineering terms, but they feel it on their skin. Experience becomes a measuring instrument. You stand in one place, then another, turning your face until your eyes water. Very scientific. A sunny slope may offer winter light, while a hollow collect cold air, yet hills redirect wind, valleys hold frost, forests shade snow, and rivers create damp corridors. You must read the whole landscape rather than trust one rule. You crouch beside a snowdrift. Its curved surface tells a story. The gentle slope faces the direction from which the wind has pushed the snow. The sharper edge forms on the sheltered side around a stump. The drift stretches like a pale tail. Around the cabin, similar shapes reveal where entrances may become buried and where walls receive the hardest pressure. One odd bit of winter wisdom is that some settlers and travellers use snow itself as insulation. Deep drifts piled against a wall could reduce direct exposure to wind, though they also trapped moisture and placed weight against the structure. Snow is a miserable guest, but under the right conditions, it arrives wearing a surprisingly warm coat. You imagine placing the cabin with its narrowest wall toward the strongest prevailing wind. Perhaps the door belongs on a calmer side. Perhaps the chimney should rise where moving air helps draw smoke upward, without driving it back into the room. Perhaps the barn should stand close enough to reach during a storm, but far enough that fire cannot leap easily from one roof to another. Every decision carries a trade-off. Historians continue to debate how deliberately ordinary settlers applied environmental knowledge when choosing homestead sites. Since many families acted under pressure, limited time, legal boundaries, or simple bad luck, a carefully chosen site may reflect generations of practical experience. It may also reflect the fact that every better piece of land was already claimed. You follow a shallow dip in the ground where the wind becomes sharper. It rushes through the gap like water through a narrow channel. Building here would be a mistake. A broad opening between hills can accelerate air, turning a moderate breeze into a persistent assault on doors, roofs, and patience. Farther uphill, the ground is drier, but the exposure is worse. Snow has been swept almost bare from patches of earth. That may look convenient now, yet it means the wind reaches the site without mercy. The best position lies somewhere between wet shelter and dry punishment. Near a stand of evergreens, the air calms again. Their branches hold snow and remain dense through winter. Deciduous trees offer less protection after autumn leaves fall. Though trunks and branches still break the force of gusts, evergreen cover can be valuable, but you also watch for dead limbs, leaning trunks, and trees that might fall under heavy snow. The forest offers fuel as well as shelter. Near woodland, you gain logs, kindling, bark, and repair material, though every useful tree still requires cutting and hauling. You look toward the stream. Its surface is edged with ice. Water is essential for drinking, cooking, washing, animals, and firefighting. But the bank is not the ideal place for a bed. Cold air settles near water, and spring floods ignore the charming plans of winter builders. The cabin should be close enough for buckets, but high enough to remain dry. Then there is the soil beneath you. Frozen ground hides its character, but summer mud leaves clues. Reeds and standing water suggest trouble. Raised ground drains better. A poorly placed dugout becomes clammy and unpleasant. Comfort, as usual, means avoiding several disasters at once. You pause beside a cluster of old stumps. Perhaps someone cleared this spot before. Perhaps fire opened the land. Perhaps indigenous people used the area seasonally long before settlers arrived. The landscape is not empty simply because newcomers describe it that way. Paths, burned clearings, managed woodlands, and known water sources often reflect older human knowledge. That knowledge could be borrowed, ignored, misunderstood, or erased. Settlers who paid attention to local people, established travel routes, and existing patterns of shelter had a better chance of understanding winter conditions. Those who assumed the land had nothing to teach them sometimes discovered its lessons during the least convenient month. By midday, you return toward the cabin. From this angle, its placement becomes clearer. Trees stand behind it. The ground rises slightly under the foundation. The door faces away from the strongest gusts. A storage shed breaks the wind on one side. None of this creates warmth by itself, but it reduces the amount of cold the walls must resist. You step inside again, bringing a crust of snow on your boots. The difference feels immediate. The cabin is still smoky, cramped, and chilly near the floor. But the wind no longer strikes you directly. The land has already done part of the work. Before mud fills the cracks, before blankets pile over the bed, before embers glow beneath ash, the settlement survives through placement. You choose where the storm must bend, where snow may drift, where water can be reached, and where trees stand close enough to help without becoming a threat. Only then do you begin raising the walls, racing the freeze while the open sky still hangs above your sleeping place. The open sky still hangs above your sleeping place, and that fact lends urgency to every movement. Winter is not waiting politely beyond the tree line. It is already pressing into the mornings, whitening puddles, stiffening mud, and shortening the hours in which hands can work without going numb. You begin with the walls. Logs lie scattered near the clearing, their bark rough beneath your palms. Some are straight, some twist slightly. A few are too heavy for one person to move, so ropes, shoulders, wooden levers, and patient swearing become part of the building method. There are no neat stacks from a modern timber yard. Each piece has been cut nearby, trimmed with axes, and dragged over uneven ground. The sound of chopping carries through the cold air. Metal bites wood with a hard, clean knock. Chips leap outward and land on the snow like pale curls. Resin clings to your gloves. The scent of pine mixes with damp earth, smoke, and sweat. A log cabin is not simply a pile of trees. The corners must lock together. The walls must rise evenly. Openings for the door and chimney must be planned before enthusiasm creates a wooden box with no sensible way inside. In many frontier regions, settlers use notched log construction because it could be built from local timber with relatively simple tools. Different communities favoured different corner joints, shaped by regional custom, available wood, and the builder's skill. A careful notch helps logs settle firmly. A poor one leaves gaps large enough for wind, rain, insects, and every other creature searching for inexpensive accommodation. You lift one end of a log while another worker guides the opposite side. Your boots slide in the mud, the timber rolls, stops, and nearly catches your fingers. Nobody applauds. You simply adjust your grip and try again. The first courses matter most. If the base is uneven, every layer above it inherits the mistake. Stones may support the lowest logs, raising them away from damp soil. Rot begins quietly, often where wood touches wet ground. A cabin can look strong while decay works underneath. The walls rise slowly to your waist, then shoulders, then above your head. As they climb, the clearing feels less exposed. Wind still passes through every seam, but the shape of a room begins to appear. You can stand inside and imagine a bed along one side, a table near the hearth, and perhaps a chest beneath the window. For the moment, the imagined bed is simply frozen ground surrounded by timber. Not every settler builds with logs. In treeless country, earth itself may become the wall. You walk in imagination across a broad grassland where timber is scarce and sod lies thick beneath tough roots. There, builders cut rectangular blocks of turf and stack them like heavy green bricks. A sod house can be surprisingly warm because its thick walls slow the movement of heat. It also brings dirt, insects, moisture, and the occasional trickle from a roof after rain. Comfort arrives with qualifications. One peculiar detail is that plants sometimes continue growing from sod walls and roofs. Grass may sprout overhead in spring, making the home look less like architecture and more like a hill that has developed a door. Livestock have occasionally been blamed for climbing onto such roofs to graze, which is not the peaceful ceiling inspection anyone requests. Where hillsides allow it, settlers may carve a dugout into earth or a bank. The ground protects against wind and changes temperature more slowly than open air. A dugout can be built quickly with fewer materials, making it useful when cold weather approaches faster than expected. Yet earth shelter is not automatically pleasant. Dampness gathers, smoke may linger, walls shed soil, rainwater finds roots that builders failed to imagine. A home partly underground can feel secure during a gale and miserable during a thaw. Historians still argue whether many dugouts were viewed mainly as temporary emergency shelters or accepted as longer-term homes by families with limited resources. Written records often treat them as stages on the path toward a proper house. But pride, poverty, memory, and later storytelling all influence those descriptions. You return to the log walls in the clearing, frost remains in shaded patches even at midday. The builders work faster now. A child gathers chips for kindling. Someone carries water. Someone else sharpens an axe on a stone, producing a slow scraping sound that seems oddly calm amid the labour. The doorframe takes shape. It is low enough that you may need to duck, which helps reduce the size of the opening and limits heat loss. Windows are small for the same reason. Glass is expensive or unavailable, so an opening may be covered with oiled paper, thin animal membrane, shutters, or cloth. Modern eyes expect broad windows and generous light. Winter survival prefers fewer holes in the wall. You run your hand over the interior surface of a log. Splinters catch your skin. The wood is cold, dense, and faintly sticky. Above you, the top of the wall remains unfinished. The room has no roof, no floor, and no true defense against weather. Yet the enclosure changes your mood. 4 walls suggest order. They give the storm something to strike beside your body. As afternoon fades, the sky turns the colour of pewter. Wind threads through the gaps with a low whistle. A few snowflakes drift down and melt on the darker timber. The builders cover tools and move loose materials beneath rough shelter. Wet tools rust. Wet rope stiffens. Wet clothing steals warmth. Every item requires care because replacement is difficult. You look at your hands. Small cuts sting where sap and cold enter the skin. Your shoulders ache. Your clothing smells of wood smoke even though no fire burns inside the new structure yet. That scent follows settlers everywhere, settling into cloth, hair, bedding, and memory. By evening, several more layers of log stand in place. The walls are strong enough to block much of the wind, but they're far from sealed. Daylight shines through the seams. You can place your eye near a gap and see the pale clearing beyond. That gap looks narrow. At midnight, with the temperature falling and a gale pressing against the wall, it will feel enormous. For now, you gather near a temporary fire and eat from a shared pot. Steam rises from the food. Heat touches your face, behind you. The unfinished cabin waits in the dark, its walls solid but breathing cold through every joint. Tomorrow, you will begin filling those hungry cracks with whatever the land and household can provide. Tomorrow arrives beneath a sky the colour of cold ash, and the unfinished cabin stands exactly as you left it, solid from a distance and alarmingly porous up close. Pale threads of morning light shine through the seams between the logs. When the wind rises, those threads become narrow blades of moving air. You place your hand beside one opening and feel the draft immediately. It is remarkable how much misery can enter through a space no wider than a finger. The work now is called chinking, though the word covers several related tasks. Large gaps between logs must first be packed with solid material. Smaller spaces are then coated or sealed with a softer mixture that hardens into a barrier. The precise method changes from place to place because settlers use whatever lies near at hand. You begin by gathering moss. It grows thickly in shaded places, dark green beneath a dusting of frost. When you pull it from the ground, the underside smells of wet soil and decaying leaves. Moss compresses well. It can be pushed deep into irregular spaces where a piece of wood will not fit. You carry armfuls toward the cabin and press them between the logs with your fingers. The cold moss soaks through your gloves. Bits of bark cling to your sleeves. It is slow work, but every filled hollow quiets the whistle of the wind. In another settlement, you might use dry grass, reeds, straw, clay, mud, split sticks, stones, animal hair, old cloth, or mixtures of several materials. There is no elegant universal recipe. Frontier construction is less a science of perfection than an art of making one imperfect thing support another. A common historical practice was to combine wooden strips or stones with a daub made from clay, soil, sand, and plant fibers. The rigid pieces filled the deepest gaps, while the softer material sealed the surface. Similar techniques appeared in many forms of vernacular building across Europe, North America, and elsewhere. You mix clay in a shallow pit beside the wall. Water turns the soil heavy and slick, straws chopped and work through it, helping the mixture hold together as it dries. Your boots sink. Mud reaches your wrists. Soon you resemble someone who has lost an argument with a riverbank. The mixture makes a wet sucking sound as you lift it. You press it into the seam and smooth it with the side of your hand. The clay is colder than you expect. It steals heat from your fingers quickly, forcing you to stop and warm them against your coat. Someone nearby uses a flat piece of wood as a crude trowel. Another person pushes thin sticks into the deeper spaces first. Children gather grass and loose fibers. Even the smallest hands can contribute because there are hundreds of cracks, each patiently waiting to become tonight's problem. The cabin changes as you work. At first, the wind passes through it freely. You can hear leaves moving outside as though there were no walls at all. Gradually, the sound dulls. Air still enters through the roof opening and doorway. But the room begins to hold stillness. That stillness matters almost as much as warmth. Moving air carries heat away from skin and bedding, even if the indoor temperature remains low. Reducing the draft makes the body feel less exposed. A person can sleep in cold air more easily than in a constant stream of it. You kneel beside the lowest logs, where dampness and insects may eventually cause trouble. The clay is already beginning to stiffen on the outer surface. Cracks will appear as it dries. Some sections may fall out after frost, rain, or the natural settling of the timber. Chinking is not a task completed once and forgotten. It becomes part of the seasonal rhythm of maintaining the house. Every autumn, the family inspects the seams. Loose material is replaced. New mud is pressed into openings. Cloth may be tucked around a window frame. A rolled blanket might be pushed against the bottom of a door after sunset. There is a curious household trick recorded in various cold regions where residents hung rugs, quilts, skins, or heavy fabric against interior walls. These coverings reduced drafts and made the surface feel less icy. A decorative hanging might therefore serve as insulation, status display, and cheerful concealment of a wall that remains structurally unconvincing. You can imagine a guest admiring the pattern, while everyone politely ignores the patch of frozen mud behind it. Researchers continue to disagree about how effective particular chinking mixtures were over long winters. especially because surviving descriptions rarely provide exact proportions. One builder praises clay and straw, another prefers moss. A third complains that mice remove the filling almost as quickly as people install it. The mice do have strong opinions about housing materials. Dry grass and soft moss make excellent nesting material, and a warm cabin offers food scraps besides. Settlers may mix lime, ash, or other substances into wall coatings to discourage pests. Though results vary, cats become valued household workers, assuming they are not currently occupying the warmest place near the hearth. As the wall rises above your reach, you stand on a rough bench. The bench rocks slightly on frozen ground. You lean toward a high seam, pressing in a wad of moss before covering it with clay. A gust strikes the outer wall. The logs groan, but the packed seam holds. Only a faint breath reaches your face. That small success feels deeply satisfying. You move around the cabin, working from one gap to the next. Some are straight. Others widen suddenly where the logs curve away from each other. At the corners, imperfect notches leave spaces that require careful packing. Around the window, the frame must allow for wood movement while still blocking air. Fresh timber shrinks as it dries. Logs settle under their own weight. A wall sealed perfectly in autumn may open new cracks by spring. The cabin is never truly motionless. It adjusts slowly to weather, weight, and time inside. The air carries the earthy smell of wet clay. It mingles with resin from the logs and smoke from the first small hearth fire. The room feels darker now because fewer beams of daylight pierce the walls. Darkness, for once, is evidence of improvement. You walk to the far corner and listen. There is a faint hiss near the floor. You kneel and find a narrow opening where two pieces of wood meet. A strip of cloth is twisted tightly and pushed inside. Over it goes another layer of clay. Silence returns. By late afternoon, the outer walls have taken on a striped appearance. Dark logs alternate with pale bands of fresh daub. Your hands ache. Mud has dried along your sleeves in stiff scales. Tiny flakes fall whenever you bend your elbows. The temperature begins to drop. Moisture on the wall may freeze before it fully dries, so the family keeps a modest fire burning. Too much heat could cause rapid drying and cracking. Too little allows the mixture to remain soft. Once again. Survival depends on moderation rather than comfort. You stand near the center of the room while the wind pushes across the clearing. The walls no longer whistle from every direction. A few drafts remain, but they can be found and repaired. The cabin has started to resist the weather rather than merely interrupt it. Still, the protection ends above your head. The walls may now hold, yet snow and rain do not approach from the side alone. You look upward through the unfinished rafters, where grey clouds gather and the first flakes begin to descend. Soon the shelter will need a roof strong enough to bear winter's full weight. The first flakes drift through the open rafters and settle on the packed earth below, melting into dark specks near the small fire. You tilt your head toward the sky and understand that walls alone are merely an ambitious fence. Without a roof, every blanket, bowl, tool, and sleeping body remains exposed to rain, snow, frost, and falling branches, so the work rises above you. Rafters must span the cabin from wall to wall, meeting along a ridge or leaning against a central support. Each timber is chosen with care. A weak or crooked piece may bend under snow. A heavy one may be difficult to lift without ropes and several willing shoulders. As usual, winter construction rewards patience while making patience feel almost impossible. You help drag a long pole across the clearing. Its cut end bumps over roots and frozen clods. Bark scrapes against your palms. Someone climbs onto the wall, balancing with the relaxed expression of a person who has clearly decided not to look down. The rafter is lifted slowly. Ropes tighten, boots slide, the pole rises, pauses, and settles into a notch at the top of the wall. A second rafter meets it from the opposite side, together. They form the first narrow triangle beneath which the household may eventually sleep. More rafters follow, spaced closely enough to carry the material above them, in timber-rich regions. Builders might cover these supports with boards, split logs, bark, or wooden shingles. Elsewhere, they use thatch, turf, reeds, clay, or layered combinations that depend heavily on local resources. Wooden shingles became common in many settlements where straight-grained timber could be split into thin pieces. They were overlapped so water ran from one layer onto the next rather than entering the roof. The principle is simple. The labour is not. Hundreds of pieces may be needed, each split, shaped, carried, and fixed in place. You pick up one newly split shingle. It smells sharp and clean. The surface is pale, fibrous, and slightly damp when tapped against another. It gives a hollow wooden note. The shingles are laid from the lowest edge upward. Each row covers the joints beneath it. Nails are valuable, so builders sometimes rely on wooden pegs, weighted poles, or clever fastening methods. Nothing is used casually when every iron object has travelled a long distance or demanded hours at a forge. A steep roof sheds snow more easily than a shallow one, yet steep roofs require longer rafters and more material. A broad overhang protects walls from rain but catches more wind. A chimney opening must be large enough to function and carefully placed so sparks do not set the roof alight. There is no choice without a new concern attached to it. Across open grasslands and northern regions, sod may cover the roof. Layers of bark, boards, or woven material form a base, and heavy blocks of turf are placed above. The thick earth provides valuable insulation, slowing heat loss through the ceiling. It also adds enormous weight. Wet sod grows heavier, snow adds more, ice adds still more. Roof supports must carry all of it while people sleep beneath them, ideally without producing sudden architectural surprises. One unusual feature of sod roofs is that they may become living surfaces. Grass roots strengthen the turf. Wildflower appear in warmer weather, and small birds may investigate the vegetation. The result can look peaceful and almost enchanted, until rain finds a weak seam and drips steadily into your supper. You climb a ladder made from two poles joined by rough wooden steps. It bends slightly as you rise. Below, the cabin floor seems farther away than good judgment recommends. Near the ridge, the wind is stronger. It tugs at your coat and sends loose snow across the roof supports. You pass shingles upward, keeping one hand wrapped around the ladder. Your fingers stiffen despite the work. The builders do not aim for beauty. They aim for overlap, strength, and speed. A crooked edge can be tolerated. A hole above the bed cannot. Architectural historians disagree over how often early settlers copied roof forms from familiar homelands, and how often they adapted immediately to local climates. A family may arrive with habits suited to one region, only to discover that different snow, rain, timber, or wind demands a different solution. Tradition guides the first attempt. Weather edits it. The roof gradually closes over the room. Strips of grey sky vanish beneath wood. The light changes from open daylight to dim shelter. Sounds change as well. Wind no longer reaches the floor directly. Voices gain a soft echo. Every falling snowflake now lands above you with a faint dry tap. For the first time, the cabin feels like an interior. You stand beneath the rafters and smell fresh timber, wet clay, and smoke. The ceiling is low enough to hold warmth nearer the sleepers. Hot air rises, so a very high roof would allow precious heat to gather uselessly overhead. A compact room is easier to warm, though it also traps smoke and every household smell with impressive efficiency. Soon the roof begins to speak. A gust presses across the shingles. producing a low flutter where one edge remains loose. A rafter creaks as weight settles through the frame. These sounds are not necessarily signs of danger. Timber expands, contracts, bends, and adjusts. Families become familiar with the ordinary language of their shelter. A soft creak may be ignored. A sudden crack earns immediate attention. Snow gathers through the evening. At first, it lies in a thin white film. Then it deepens, softening the roofline and filling small hollows. A well-built roof spreads the load through rafters and walls. A poorly supported section may bow inward. During heavy storms, settlers sometimes climb up to remove snow or push it away with poles from below. This is exhausting and risky work, especially in darkness, yet allowing deep wet snow to remain can be more dangerous. You imagine waking to a groan above the bed. The room is black except for embers. Wind moves outside. Dust sifts from the rafters onto your blanket. You lie still, listening, trying to decide whether the sound is harmless settling or a warning that the roof has carried enough. Perhaps you rise. Perhaps you wake another person. Perhaps everyone stands in the cold, staring upward while pretending not to be nervous. Roof failure is not the only fear. Sparks from the hearth may travel upward and catch on dry thatch or wooden shingles. Chimneys built from logs lined with clay can crack as they heat. Stone chimneys are safer, but they demand time, skill, and suitable material. Some homes use a simple smoke opening rather than a full chimney. Smoke escapes slowly, darkening rafters and stinging eyes. It may also discourage insects and help preserve certain foods hung overhead, which is a practical benefit wrapped inside a deeply irritating atmosphere. The final open strip near the ridge is covered before nightfall. Workers press extra material around vulnerable joints. Stones or weighted poles secure sections until permanent fastenings can be completed. You step outside and look back. Snow settles on the finished roof. Smoke lifts from the chimney, bends in the wind, and trails toward the trees. The cabin appears small beneath the winter sky, but it now possesses a complete shell inside. The sound of weather has become muffled. Snow brushes the roof like fingertips moving across cloth. The rafters groan quietly under their new burden, and the family watches the ceiling for drifting dust or movement. The walls block much of the wind. The roof holds back the falling snow, yet the room is still bitterly cold, because shelter preserves only the warmth that you manage to create. Your gaze lowers toward the hearth, where a weak flame waits to become the centre of every winter night. Your gaze settles on the hearth, where the weak flame licks around two split logs and throws a trembling amber light across the room. The cabin has walls now. It has a roof. It has a door that closes, more or less, and chinking that keeps most of the wind from wandering through at will. Yet none of those things creates heat. For that, everyone depends on the fire. You kneel beside it and extend your hands. Warmth reaches your palms first, then your fingers, while your back remains chilled. The difference between the two sides of your body feels almost absurd. Turn around, and the warmth trades places. Winter comfort becomes a slow rotation, like meat before a cooking flame, though hopefully with a more dignified ending. The hearth is built from stone and clay. Set against one wall, its surface is uneven, darkened by soot, and cracked in places where repeated heating has stressed the material. A broad opening allows room for logs, pots, and tools. Above it rises a chimney intended to carry smoke outside. Intended is the important word. A cold chimney may draw poorly when the fire is first lit. Smoke curls upward, hesitates, then rolls back into the room. It spreads beneath the rafters in a bluish layer. Your eyes begin to water. Someone opens the door briefly, releasing both smoke and precious warmth. the smoke finally finds its upward path. But not before your clothes, hair, blankets, and food have accepted another generous coating of its scent. For many settlers, the hearth served as the primary source of warmth, light, and cooking heat. It was the centre of household life, especially in winter, when other rooms might remain barely usable. Families worked, ate, repaired clothing, told stories, and slept as near to the fire as space and safety allowed. You watch a woman arrange the logs with an iron poker. She does not simply throw wood into the flames. Large pieces burn slowly. Small pieces catch quickly. Dry hardwood produces steady heat and long-lasting coals, while damp wood hisses, smokes, and wastes effort. The choice of fuel depends on the region. Oak, maple, beech, birch, pine, peat, brush, dried dung, corn cobs, and crop waste may all find their way into a fire. A household surrounded by forest can still run short of usable wood if storms, illness, deep snow, or exhaustion prevent cutting and hauling. A tree standing nearby is not yet fuel. It must be felled, trimmed, split, carried, stacked, protected from rain, and brought indoors in manageable pieces. Greenwood may contain so much moisture that much of the fire's energy goes toward drying it. Seasoned wood burns more efficiently, though planning a year ahead is easier when you have already survived the previous year. You lift a log from the stack beside the wall, the bark flakes beneath your fingers. It feels heavier than expected and cold enough to sting your skin when placed on the fire. One end begins to smoke before the surface catches. The room brightens. Shadows move along the walls. The roof beams seem to shift as flames rise and fall. Faces appear warm and golden from one angle, then disappear into darkness when someone leans away. Firelight is comforting because it moves. It also demands attention because it moves. A spark jumps from the hearth and lands on the packed earth. A child stamps it out without alarm. Embers can ignite straw bedding, hanging cloth, wooden walls, or dry roof material. Every warm night carries a small threat of sudden disaster. One peculiar custom in some households was to cover glowing coals with ash before sleep. The ash reduced airflow and allowed embers to smoulder for hours. In the morning, someone might uncover them, add dry tinder, and coax the fire back to life without striking a fresh spark. The practice sounds gentle and sensible until you remember that the person responsible must judge exactly how much ash is enough. Too little, and the fire burns down quickly. Too much, and the embers may die. Frontier central heating comes with a highly personal relationship to dust. You take a wooden chair near the hearth. The seat is hard, but your knees appreciate the warmth. A kettle hangs from an iron hook. Steam gathers at its lid. The boiling water adds a little moisture to the dry air, though too much dampness can condense on cold walls and freeze. The family regulates the fire by habit. A wide blaze produces quick heat but consumes fuel rapidly. A compact bed of coals lasts longer. Logs are pushed together when more heat is needed and separated when the room grows smoky or fuel must be saved. Researchers remain divided over how warm ordinary cabins could realistically become during severe weather, because indoor temperatures were rarely measured and varied dramatically with construction. Fuel, family size, and wind. Some recollections describe rooms warm enough for shirt sleeves near the hearth. Others tell of ice forming in distant corners, while people huddled around the flames. Both may be true. You move only a few steps away and feel the temperature drop. Near the fire, your face is warm. Near the wall, the air feels sharp. Cold settles low, especially along the floor, where children, animals, and anyone unlucky enough to sleep on a pallet may feel it most strongly. Hot air rises toward the rafters, carrying smoke with it. Meat, herbs, or damp clothing may hang above. where rising warmth helps dry or preserve them. Soot collects on everything. The ceiling gradually darkens until the original colour of the wood becomes a distant memory. There is a practical advantage to this smoky environment. Insects dislike it. Certain pests retreat from heavily smoked rafters and fabrics, though they rarely surrender the cabin completely. The smoke also helps preserve food, but it irritates lungs, worsens coughing, and makes breathing difficult for people already weakened by winter illness. You hear someone cough in the corner. The sound is dry and persistent. The family barely looks up, not because they do not care, but because coughing is common in a room where fire and poor ventilation must share the same air. Opening a window would improve breathing and destroy warmth. Closing everything preserves heat and traps smoke. Winter offers choices that are not truly choices. As night deepens, the fire is allowed to settle. Flames shrink into glowing red pockets beneath blackened wood. The room darkens, conversation softens. Someone adds one last thick log, placing it carefully so it burns slowly through the first part of the night. There may be a wooden screen or metal guard near the hearth, but often protection is limited. Bedding must remain far enough away to avoid sparks, yet close enough to receive heat. Children are warned repeatedly. Animals learn through experience. Adults wake at small changes in sound. You begin to recognize the fire's voices. A sharp pop means resin or trapped moisture has burst inside the wood. A low sigh comes when a log collapses into the coals. A faint ticking rises from heated stone. A sudden roar may mean the chimney is drawn strongly, or a gust has forced air through the room. The fire is never silent, even when the people are near midnight. Someone will rise to tend it, perhaps an older child, perhaps a parent who sleeps lightly, perhaps the person nearest the hearth, selected by geography rather than enthusiasm. They will push the coals together, add fuel, check for sparks, and listen to the wind. That brief waking may prevent the room from becoming dangerously cold before dawn. You stretch your feet toward the remaining warmth. The soles of your boots begin to dry, releasing the smell of wet leather. The dog shifts closer without requesting permission. Behind you, the sealed walls resist the gale. Above, the roof bears the snow. At the center of everything, the hearth glows like a small red heart. Yet even this fire cannot warm every corner or last forever. When the flames sink and the household finally lies down, the bed itself must preserve whatever warmth the body can make. When the flames sink and the household finally lies down, the bed becomes a small machine for holding warmth. It does not create heat. It merely tries to keep your body from surrendering too much of it to the floor, the wall, and the air. You cross the room toward a wooden frame standing near the hearth. Calling it a bed is generous, though not entirely wrong. 4-post support rails joined with pegs across the frame. Ropes have been stretched in a crisscross pattern to carry the bedding above the ground. You press one hand against the rope. It gives under your weight, then tightens again. Raised bedsteads were common in many early modern and frontier households because elevation reduced contact with cold floors, dampness, dirt, and crawling pests. The ropes stretch with use, causing the mattress to sag toward the center. This practical maintenance is often linked with the familiar expression about sleeping tight. Although language scholars remain cautious about claiming a simple direct origin, you sit on the edge. The frame creaks, but it holds. The mattress above the ropes may be little more than a cloth sack filled with straw. Its shape shifts when you move. Hard stalks press through the fabric. Dust rises with a dry, grassy smell that reminds you of barns and harvest fields. A wealthy household might own a feather bed, perhaps laid over a firmer mattress. A poorer family may rely on straw, hay, leaves, wool scraps, dried grass, or folded blankets. Bedding reflects class as clearly as clothing or tableware, though in darkness everyone still hopes the mice stay elsewhere. A loose knot can turn the night into a gradual descent. By morning, you may wake in a deep hollow with another sleeper rolled against you and the blanket gathered somewhere near your knees. Not every home contains a formal bedstead. You look toward the far wall, where a pallet rests on the floor. It is a thin mattress or folded layer of cloth, laid down at night and moved during the day. Children, servants, labourers, guests, and travellers may sleep there when permanent beds are unavailable. The floor is coldest near the door and walls, air leaks inward, then settles low. A pallet placed directly on earth absorbs chill and moisture, so boards, reeds, hides, or spare cloth may be placed beneath it. You kneel and touch the floor. The packed soil is hard and faintly damp. Even through your sleeve, the cold feels immediate. Sleeping here means losing warmth downward all night. In some cabins, builders create bunks against the wall. Rough wooden platforms stack one above another, saving space and allowing several people to sleep in a narrow area. The upper bunk may be warmer because heat rises. It may also be smokier, closer to insects in the roof, and more difficult to reach without stepping on somebody's hand. There is always a price for warmth. One curious sleeping arrangement found in some compact households is the cupboard bed or enclosed box bed. Wooden panels and curtains surround the sleeper, creating a smaller pocket of air that warms more easily than the whole room. To modern eyes, it resembles sleeping inside a cabinet, which feels either wonderfully snug or slightly unsettling, depending on your relationship with furniture. Privacy is not a separate room. It is a curtain, a hanging blanket, or the courtesy of everyone looking toward the fire. Material culture specialists continue to discuss how widespread fixed bedsteads truly were among the poorest settlers. Since household inventories often record valuable furniture while overlooking temporary pallets and improvised sleeping places, a written list may mention one bed even when 6 people slept in the house. The missing sleepers did not vanish. Their bedding simply held too little monetary value to interest the clerk. You imagine the room at night. The main bed belongs to the household heads or perhaps to an older relative. Children share a smaller bed. A hired worker sleeps on a bench. A visitor receives a straw pallet near the hearth. Along with assurances that the draft is not usually this bad, the visitor is wise enough not to ask what usually means. Benches may serve as both seating and sleeping furniture. A broad chest can support a tired body. Chairs placed together form a desperate platform. Cloaks become pillows. Saddlebags become headrests. Travellers learn that exhaustion improves almost any mattress. Wood is left rough. Pegs replace iron fasteners. The frame may be attached directly to the cabin wall to save material. A wall bed has its own problem. Logs remain cold, and drafts slip through seams. The sleeper may hang cloth, fur, or a spare quilt between the bedding and timber. This keeps skin from touching the icy surface and catches some moving air. You run your fingers along a hanging cover. It feels dry near the fire and cool near the bottom, behind it. The wall carries a thin patch of frost, too near the hearth, and sparks threaten the bedding too far away, and warmth fades before reaching you, beneath a leak. The mattress grows damp. Near the door, every late arrival brings a gust. Under the roof edge, dust and insects fall from above. The ideal spot exists mostly in imagination. Before lying down, you inspect the frame. One rope has loosened. You pull it tight and secure the knot. The sound of fibers straining fills the quiet room. Nearby, someone shakes out a pallet, releasing straw dust into the firelight. A hide or coarse cloth covers the ropes. The mattress settles above it. Another blanket softens the surface. Pillows may be filled with feathers, wool, straw, or cloth scraps. More covering brings weight to be added once everyone lies down. You lower yourself carefully. The frame complains. The mattress rustles beneath your shoulder. Straw shifts around your hips. A hard stem presses against your ribs, so you move slightly and discover another one near your neck. Comfort is negotiated 1 inch at a time. Still, your body is no longer touching the floor. The air beneath the bed forms a modest barrier. The mattress traps pockets of warmth. The wall hanging slows the draft. Each humble layer performs one small task. Around you, the household settles into its assigned places. Rope creaks, straw whispers, a child turns over. Someone folds a coat beneath their head. The fire gives a quiet pop, and shadows move across the rafters. You begin to understand that a settler bed is not a single object. It is a structure, a sack, a collection of coverings, a location near warmth, and an agreement about who sleeps where. And inside that rustling mattress, among straw, feathers, moss, and cloth, other small residents may already be preparing for the night. And they require no invitation, no blanket, and absolutely no concern for personal boundaries. You lie still on the straw mattress and listen. At first, you hear only the ordinary sounds of the cabin. The fire settles with a soft crack. Wind brushes the roof. Rope beneath the bed gives a faint creak as another sleeper turns. Then something tiny moves inside the mattress with a dry, secret rustle. You stop breathing for a moment. There it is again. Perhaps it is only straw shifting under your weight. Perhaps it is a beetle. Perhaps it is a mouse arranging its evening plans directly beneath your shoulder. The frontier bed offers many possibilities, very few of them luxurious. Mattress filling depends on what the household can gather, grow, trade, or afford. Straw is common because grain cultivation produces it in useful quantities. It is light, insulating, and easy to pack into a cloth sack. Fresh straw smells pleasantly dry and sweet, especially when compared with damp earth or smoke-soaked blankets. Yet straw does not remain fresh forever. It flattens under repeated use. Stalks break into dust. Moisture from bodies, boots, leaks, and humid air gathers inside. The filling may develop a sour smell, especially in a room where ventilation is limited. Families must open the sack, stir the contents, dry them, or replace them when new material becomes available. This is one established feature of domestic life in many farming communities. Bedding was often renewed seasonally, particularly after harvest. When clean straw was easiest to obtain, an old mattress could be emptied, its cover washed or aired, and the filling replaced. You imagine the household carrying the mattress outside on a clear autumn day. The sack is opened, grey. Crushed straw spills onto the ground. Dust rises in a cloud. Children sneeze. Chickens investigate. A dog chooses the exact pile everyone is trying to clean. Fresh straw is forked into the cover and pushed toward the corners. The sack grows round and firm again. For a few nights, the bed feels almost grand. Then gravity resumes its work. Where straw is scarce, settlers turn to other materials. Dried leaves can provide softness if gathered at the right stage and kept free from damp. Corn husks may be shredded or folded. Grass, reeds, bracken, wool waste, seed husks, and moss all appear in different regions. Moss is especially useful in cold landscapes. When dried properly, it traps air and moulds around the body. Indigenous communities across northern regions used moss in bedding, insulation, and infant care long before many newcomers understood its full value. Collected carelessly, however, moss brings moisture, soil, and tiny creatures indoors. It should be dried, shaken, and inspected. The fact that something grows naturally beneath a tree does not mean it arrives ready for your pillow. Feathers offer another level of comfort. A feather bed can be deep, warm, and remarkably soft. It conforms around the sleeper, holding warm air close to the body. Goose and duck feathers are especially valued. Though collecting enough for a mattress takes time, a single household may save feathers over many seasons. Smaller feathers and down provide warmth, while larger quills can poke through the fabric. A tightly woven cover is essential. Otherwise, feathers escape through seams and drift around the room, attaching themselves to clothing and food with quiet determination. A curious household practice involved plucking feathers from live geese at certain times of year. Although the frequency and gentleness of this work varied greatly, the birds were not known to enjoy contributing to domestic comfort. One imagines them remembering every participant. Featherbeds also absorb moisture and odours. They must be aired, turned, beaten, and protected from damp in cold weather. This is difficult. Taking bedding outdoors risks snow or frost. Leaving it indoors allows sweat and smoke to remain trapped. Domestic historians remain divided over how comfortable featherbedding truly was in poorer households, because inventories often list featherbeds as valuable possessions without describing their condition. One recorded feather mattress might be new and lofty, another might be old, lumpy, damp, and shared by several people. Wealth can be measured not only by owning a bed, but by how often its contents can be cleaned and renewed. Then come the pests. Fleas thrive where people, animals, textiles, and warm bodies gather. Lice cling to clothing and hair. Bed bugs hide in cracks in wood, seams in cloth, and joints in furniture. Mice chew mattress covers to reach soft nesting material. You feel an itch near your ankle. Immediately, every part of your body begins to itch in sympathy. The sensible response is to inspect the bedding, shake blankets, wash clothing, and clean the room. The realistic response, in a freezing cabin with limited water and no spare mattress, is rather more complicated. Water must be carried, heated, and saved for drinking and cooking. Washing large blankets in winter is exhausting. Drying them can take days. A damp blanket may freeze stiff before it becomes useful again. Households rely on airing, beating, brushing, smoking, boiling smaller cloth items, and exposing bedding to strong sunlight when weather permits. Herbs such as lavender, pennyroyal, wormwood, or tansy are sometimes placed near bedding in hopes of discouraging insects. Their effectiveness varies. The fragrance at least improves the atmosphere, giving the bed a faint herbal smell beneath the more dominant notes of smoke, wool, and humanity. Ash may be scattered in cracks. Bed frames may be scrubbed with hot water. Wooden joints are inspected because pests hide in narrow spaces. Curtains and wall coverings need attention as well. You run your fingers along the seam of the mattress sack. The cloth feels coarse and slightly gritty. A tiny dark speck moves near the stitching. You brush it away without examining it too closely. Bedtime remains easier when certain discoveries are treated with diplomacy. Sleeping near animals adds another layer of difficulty. Chickens, dogs, cats, and sometimes young livestock may share the shelter during severe weather. Their warmth is useful. Their fleas are less so. Cats help control mice, though they may also sleep directly on the bedding and object loudly when moved. Dogs provide warmth near the feet and serve as alarms, but they bring mud, fur, and their own collection of travelling companions. The boundary between human space and animal space is thinner than modern households often expect. Winter survival encourages cooperation with creatures that do not understand laundry. You shift deeper into the mattress. Straw crackles around your ears. Beneath the smoky scent, you detect dry grass and a trace of damp earth. The filling supports you unevenly, but it holds warmth better than the bare boards below. That is the constant bargain. A mattress may itch, smell, sag, and occasionally move when you're not moving, yet it creates a layer between your body and the cold. Its trapped air slows heat loss. Its bulk softens the hard frame. Its materials can be repaired without distant factories or expensive trade. You pull the blanket higher, around you. Sleepers settle despite the rustling, scratching, an occasional quiet slap aimed at an unseen flea. People become accustomed to discomfort when no simple alternative exists. Soon the mattress grows warmer beneath you, and even its small inhabitants seem to quiet. The room darkens further. Firelight fades across the wall before sleep can finally arrive. However, you must decide what clothing remains on your body, because in this cold, undressing may be the least sensible bedtime ritual imaginable. Undressing may be the least sensible bedtime ritual imaginable, so you remain seated on the edge of the mattress while the household prepares for sleep without removing very much at all. Your coat comes off first, but only because it is damp along the shoulders and heavy with melted snow. You hang it near the hearth, close enough to dry but far enough that a spark cannot reach it. Steam rises faintly from the wool. Beneath it, you still wear a shirt, waistcoat, breeches or trousers, stockings, and perhaps another layer wrapped around your middle. There is no sudden transformation into delicate nightclothes. The room is too cold, the bedding too uncertain, and the morning too near. You loosen your collar, and that small movement feels almost luxurious. The cloth around your neck has trapped sweat from the day's labour, and the skin beneath it is chilled and irritated. You rub the area with your fingertips, then quickly fasten part of the collar again when a draught reaches you. In many households before modern central heating, people commonly slept in linen shirts, shifts, caps, stockings, or other garments that covered much of the body. Clothing preserved modesty in crowded rooms and added insulation when indoor temperatures fell near freezing. A purpose-made nightshirt may be available in a prosperous home, but on a frontier it is often simply the cleanest undergarment you own. Assuming cleanliness has survived several days of smoke, mud, labour, and limited washing water, you look toward the other sleepers. A child wears a long shirt that reaches below the knees. An older woman keeps a woolen shawl over her shoulders as she settles into bed. A man removes his outer jacket but leaves his stockings on. Nobody finds this unusual. The important question is not what appears elegant, it is what remains dry. Damp clothing conducts heat away from the body more quickly than dry layers, if your stockings are wet from snow or sweat. Keeping them on may leave your feet colder, yet removing them exposes skin to freezing air, and you may not own a second dry pair. You sit near the fire and roll one stocking down slowly. The wool clings to your calf, your skin beneath it is pale, marked by the weave, and unpleasantly cold. You rub the foot briskly, checking the toes for numbness or discoloration. A dry stocking is taken from a peg. It is not warm, but it has been hanging above the hearth, and that makes it feel wonderfully civilized. You pull it on, then repeat the process with the other foot. This simple change may matter more than another blanket. Clothing works by trapping small pockets of air. Several loose layers often protect better than one tight garment. Linen next to the skin absorbs moisture. Wool above it continues to insulate even when slightly damp. Fur, leather, or tightly woven cloth blocks moving air. Settlers do not need modern laboratory language to understand this. They learn through repeated discomfort. A tight boot can restrict circulation. A loose scarf can seal a collar. A cap can change the entire night. You reach for one now. It is a plain sleeping cap made from linen or wool, soft from use and slightly ridiculous by modern standards. Once it is tied beneath your chin, your ears and the top of your head feel less exposed. Nightcaps were not merely decorative symbols from old paintings. They offered practical warmth in poorly heated rooms and helped protect hair and bedding from dirt, oils, and insects. The cap also gives everyone the appearance of preparing to perform in a very serious play about porridge. One lesser-known bedtime habit involved warming clothing near the fire before putting it on, especially stockings, shirts, or caps intended for the night. This required care because cloth placed too close could scorch, and leather could crack or shrink. The distance between pleasantly warmed and quietly smoking was not generous. You hold your cap near the hearth for a moment before settling it more firmly over your ears. The warmth lasts only briefly, but the memory of it is comforting. Researchers disagree about how consistently poorer families changed into separate sleep garments. Since surviving inventories list clothing without explaining exactly when each item was worn, some people may have kept dedicated nightwear, others probably slept in much of the same clothing they wore during the day, particularly during severe weather, travel, illness, or overcrowding. Respectable advice might recommend airing the body and changing linen. Winter sometimes answers that advice with laughter. You remove your shoes, though even this decision is not automatic. Boots carry snow, manure, mud, and grit into the bedding, leaving them on damages blankets and make sleep awkward. Yet boots can be difficult to put on again if they freeze stiff overnight. The household places footwear near the hearth, never directly against the hottest stones. Leather dries slowly, if heated too quickly. It hardens and cracks. Grease or fat may be rubbed into it to preserve flexibility and resist moisture. You set your boots upright and loosen the laces fully. A wisp of steam rises from inside them. The smell is powerful enough to establish its own corner of the room. In dangerous conditions, travellers sometimes keep footwear inside bedding or use it as a pillow so it will not freeze. This is not a romantic arrangement, but neither is trying to force your feet into two rigid leather boxes before dawn. Tonight, your boots remain within reach. You keep your trousers on, the fabric is coarse and patched at one knee, a belt or braces are loosened, allowing you to breathe more comfortably. Your shirt stays tucked around your body, reducing gaps where cold air might enter. A waistcoat may remain as well, especially if it is wool. The sleeves of your shirt provide little protection by themselves. Some sleepers wrap a scarf around the neck or place a folded cloth across the chest. Hands are another problem. Mittens in bed can feel clumsy, but cold fingers ache and wake you. A child may sleep with hands tucked beneath the arms. An adult might wear fingerless wool coverings, allowing enough movement to tend the fire or comfort a baby without fully exposing the skin. You test the mattress again and slide beneath the first blanket. The clothing feels bulky. Fabric gathers behind your knees. The cap shifts over one eye. Your dry stockings catch slightly on the coarse sheet. None of this resembles effortless luxury. Still, warmth begins to gather. Your shirt holds air against your skin. The waistcoat protects your chest. The cap covers your ears. The blanket lies over everything, creating another enclosed layer. The household follows the same quiet ritual. Garments are loosened but not discarded. Damp pieces move toward the fire. Dry pieces remain on bodies. Children are checked. A shawl becomes a head covering. A spare skirt is folded over someone's feet. A coat is placed across the end of the bed as an extra cover. Clothing and bedding become almost indistinguishable. A cloak may serve as a blanket. A blanket may be worn around the shoulders during midnight chores. A thick petticoat adds insulation beneath the covers. Nothing belongs to only one purpose when winter demands flexibility. You notice the fire dimming again. The cold at the edge of the room becomes more pronounced. Frost gathers near the window covering, tracing pale shapes along its surface. Nobody suggests removing another layer. You settle deeper and feel the person beside you shift closer. Not from affection alone, though affection certainly helps. In this room, personal warmth is a shared resource. Soon, the household will abandon any remaining hope of private sleeping space and arrange itself according to age, need, family custom, and the simple mathematics of body heat. The household now arranges itself according to age, need, custom, and the simple mathematics of body heat. You feel the mattress dip as another person settles beside you, then someone else climbs in from the opposite side, pulling the blankets upward and disturbing the careful pocket of warmth you have only just created. A child is lifted over 2 pairs of legs and placed near the middle, where the air is warmest. The dog watches this operation with deep professional interest. Privacy gives way quietly. No one announces it. No one needs to. In a small winter cabin, sleeping alone may be a luxury, a poor use of space, or simply impossible. Beds are expensive objects, rooms are few, and firewood is limited. Several people sharing one sleeping place can preserve warmth far more effectively than one person lying alone beneath thin covers. This was a familiar reality in many pre-industrial homes. Families, servants, travellers, and guests often shared rooms, and sometimes beds, because domestic space was organised around economy rather than modern expectations of personal separation. You lie on your side because there is no longer enough room to lie flat on your back. The child beside you curls inward, knees drawn toward the chest, behind you. Another sleeper presses close enough that you can feel each breath through several layers of cloth. The mattress responds to every movement. When one person turns, everyone adjusts. It is less like sleeping in a bed and more like participating in a very slow human puzzle. Body heat accumulates quickly. The centre of the bed becomes almost comfortable, while the person nearest the wall receives the full benefit of frost and drafts. This creates an unspoken ranking. Babies, small children, the elderly, and the ill may be placed in the warmest positions. Stronger adults take the outer edges, or at least that is the ideal. Actual arrangements depend on who falls asleep first, who complains most convincingly, and who has elbows sharp enough to influence policy. You pull your knees upward and tuck your feet beneath the lower edge of a coat laid over the blankets. A child's heel presses against your shin. Someone's cap brushes your cheek. The air beneath the coverings smells of wool, smoke, dried, and the faint sourness of clothing worn through long days. The warmth is real, though so is the closeness. A bed shared by several people develops its own climate. Breath adds moisture, clothing traps heat. Blankets become warmer near the centre and damp near the edges. If someone has come to bed in wet garments, everyone notices. Guests add another layer of negotiation. Travel in winter is dangerous, so households often offer shelter to strangers, neighbours, messengers, labourers, or relatives caught by weather. Hospitality may mean soup, a place near the fire, and half a mattress already occupied by people who are not informed that company was coming. A traveller entering after dark carries cold into the room like luggage. Snow melts from the coat, boots thump against the floor, the door opens, and the entire household feels the gust, yet turning someone away could leave that person exposed to freezing temperatures, poor roads, and disorientation in snow. The newcomer may be given the warmest available corner, especially if exhausted. They may share with another adult of the same sex, sleep beside children, or receive a pallet near the hearth. One curious custom from crowded inns and homes was the practice of strangers sharing beds without considering the arrangement remarkable. The agreement was usually practical rather than intimate. You stayed on your side, kept your clothing on, and hoped the other person did not snore like a damaged chimney. Customs of modesty still mattered. Curtains around beds, nightclothes, careful positioning, and rules about who could sleep beside whom helped preserve social boundaries. But those boundaries were adapted to circumstances. Winter was not impressed by embarrassment. Social historians continue to debate how ordinary people experienced this lack of privacy, because written accounts often come from wealthier observers who had more space and stronger expectations of separation. Crowded sleeping may have felt uncomfortable to some, entirely normal to others, and reassuring to children accustomed to hearing familiar breathing nearby. You listen now. A low snore begins near the foot of the bed. Someone coughs twice and turns toward the wall. A baby makes a soft, restless sound from a nearby cradle. The dog sighs on the floor, apparently burdened by the family's poor organization. Shared sleep provides more than warmth. It allows people to notice illness, nightmares, breathing problems, and sudden cold. A parent feels when a child's body is too hot with fever or too cold beneath the blanket. An older person who wakes confused is not alone. During storms, everyone hears the roof groan and the fire fade. The sleeping group becomes a kind of alarm system. It also spreads fleas, lice, coughs, and every minor disturbance with great efficiency. You feel another itch at your ankle and decide not to investigate. The arrangement changes through the night. A child who begins in the center may rotate sideways. A blanket may migrate toward one edge. Someone overheats and pushes it down, allowing cold air to rush across 3 other bodies. Complaints follow in whispers. The blanket is pulled back. Peace resumes. In larger households, sleeping places reflect rank and work. The household heads may occupy the main bed. Children share trundle beds that slide beneath it during the day. Servants sleep in lofts, kitchens, workrooms, or near the people they assist. Hired hands may bed down in barns if animals provide enough warmth. A trundle bed is a low frame on small wheels or runners. It saves space by disappearing beneath a larger bed each morning. At night, it emerges with a scraping sound across the floor and becomes the children's domain. The lower position is colder, naturally. Architecture seems determined to remind younger sleepers of their place in society. In the loft above, warmth from the room below may rise through gaps in the boards. The air can be warmer than near the floor, but smoke gathers there too. Roof drafts, mice, and falling dust remain part of the bargain. You imagine climbing a ladder into darkness, carrying a candle carefully, then crawling beneath the roof where snow presses only a few inches above your head. Every gust makes the shingles murmur. Back in the main bed. The shared warmth has now softened the worst of the cold. Your feet are no longer numb. Your hands rest beneath your arms. The child beside you breathes evenly. The fire continues to fade, but the bed holds its heat. This is why bodies matter. Each person produces warmth continuously, and layers of cloth slow its escape. Several sleepers under one covering warm a larger pocket of trapped air. The effect is simple, powerful, and entirely free, which makes it one of the few winter advantages that does not require splitting logs. Yet the feet remain vulnerable. Even in a crowded bed, cold settles near the lower edge where blankets lift and drafts enter, to solve that final discomfort. The household turns to heated stones, warming pans, bricks, and other objects carried carefully from hearth to mattress, to solve that final discomfort. The household turns toward the hearth, where several objects wait among the embers like modest tools of rescue. You slide carefully from the crowded bed and immediately regret leaving its warmth. Cold air enters beneath your shirt. The packed floor feels hard through your stockings, around you. The other sleepers shift closer together, sealing the space you have abandoned with remarkable speed. Near the fire rests a flat stone. It has been warming beside the coals for some time, slowly absorbing heat. You crouch and hold your palm a few inches above it. The air shimmers faintly. Its surface looks harmless, but touching it directly would be foolish. A thick cloth is folded around the stone. You lift it with both hands and feel warmth spread through the fabric. The weight surprises you. Carrying it across the room requires slow steps, especially in dim firelight where boots, stools, children, and dogs all seem determined to occupy the same narrow path. You reach the bed and place the wrapped stone near the foot. The mattress rustles as it settles. Heat begins moving outward through straw and cloth. You pull the blanket over it, creating a small warm chamber for your feet. Heated stones and bricks were widely used in cold homes and during winter travel. They could warm bedding, carriage floors, church pews, and the feet of anyone prepared to carry several pounds of heated material without dropping it. The method is simple because the materials are common. Stone absorbs heat near the fire, then releases it gradually. Brick behaves in much the same way. Neither requires complicated equipment. Both can also burn skin, scorch cloth, crack under sudden temperature changes, or introduce ash into the bedding. Historical comfort often arrives carrying terms and conditions. You slip your feet beneath the blanket. The warmth reaches your toes almost immediately, after hours of chill. The sensation is wonderfully intense, almost painful at first. Blood returns to the skin with a prickling feeling. You do not place your feet directly against the stone. Cloth remains between you and its surface. A child might be warned several times not to kick the wrapping away. An older sleeper may test the heat with a hand before allowing it near delicate skin. Some households use a brick heated at the hearth and wrapped in flannel. Others place hot water in a sturdy pottery bottle. Metal containers may also be used, though seams and closures must be reliable. A leaking hot water vessel in bed is not a small inconvenience. It soaks the mattress, chills the sleeper after the heat fades, and creates an excellent reason to question every decision that led to bedtime. You look toward another tool hanging beside the fireplace. It resembles a shallow metal pan with a long handle and a pierced lid. This is a warming pan. Glowing coals are placed inside. The lid closes over them, reducing the chance that sparks escape. The long handle allows you to slide the pan between sheets or blankets and move it across the mattress before anyone lies down. Warming pans were familiar objects in many European and colonial households, particularly among families wealthy enough to own metal domestic equipment. Surviving examples are often made from brass or copper, sometimes decorated with punched patterns that allowed heat and air to circulate. You lift the handle. The pan feels heavier than it appears. A few embers glow inside, sending thin traces of smoke through the pierced lid. You insert it beneath the top blanket and sweep it slowly from side to side. The fabric rises and falls over the pan. Warmth travels across the mattress. The movement must remain steady. Leave the coals in one place too long, and the bedding may brown, scorch, or ignite. It is an oddly peaceful activity, provided you ignore the fact that you're moving live fire through a pile of dry cloth and straw. One unusual warning associated with warming pans concerned fumes from poorly burning charcoal in a closed room. Charcoal could release dangerous gases without producing much visible smoke. People understood that certain fumes caused headaches, illness, or death even before the chemistry was fully explained. For that reason, hot stones or properly managed wood embers could be safer choices than smouldering charcoal in tightly enclosed bedding. You draw the pan out and inspect the blanket. No scorch marks, a triumph. The mattress now carries a gentle warmth from shoulders to feet. The pan returns to the hearth, where the embers are emptied safely. It should never remain beneath the covers while someone sleeps. Domestic historians have not reached full agreement on how frequently ordinary settlers used elaborate warming pans compared with simpler heated stones and bricks. Metal pans appear often in inventories and museum collections, but those records naturally favoured durable possessions. A river stone wrapped in cloth leaves little evidence behind after 200 years. The humbler method may have been more common precisely because it disappeared so completely. Travellers develop related solutions. A heated brick may be placed in a wagon before a winter journey. A small foot stove, made from wood or metal, can hold a container of embers beneath the feet. Worshippers carry such devices into unheated churches, where sermons may last much longer than circulation in the toes. Imagine sitting through a solemn winter service with a box of coals beneath your skirts, while trying to appear spiritually focused. Warmth has always required concentration. Back inside the cabin, another stone is prepared for the older woman near the wall. Her feet remain cold despite stockings and blankets. You carry it to her bed and tuck it near the edge. Checking that the wrapping is thick, she thanks you softly. This small exchange reveals something important. Heated objects are not distributed at random. Babies cannot safely lie beside very hot stones. Sick people may need careful supervision. Older sleepers often benefit most, but their skin can burn easily. The household decides who needs warmth and who can manage the risk. Children may receive a brick that has already cooled slightly. Adults test it first. A stone intended for the feet shouldn't migrate toward the stomach or chest during sleep. Everyone is reminded to keep cloth around it. Of course, sleeping people are not famous for obeying instructions. During the night, legs shift, blankets twist, wrappings loosen. A hot object may roll into an uncomfortable position. Someone wakes suddenly, pushes it away, and sends it thumping onto the floor. The sound wakes half the room. The dog barks once, then silence slowly returns. There are other ways to prepare the bed. A bottle filled with warm water can be moved from one sleeper to another. An iron heated near the hearth might be wrapped and used briefly, though its shape and temperature demand caution. Bags of warmed grain or sand hold heat, provided they remain dry. Even clothing can serve as a warming tool. A coat placed near the hearth is spread over the mattress moments before sleep. Stockings are warmed in the hands. A nightcap rests near the stones for a few precious seconds. Each method transfers a little of the hearth into the bed. That is the true purpose. The fire cannot follow you beneath the blankets, at least not safely, so you borrow its heat. Store it in stone, brick, water, iron, cloth, or grain. Then carry it across the cold room. You return to your place and slide beneath the covers. The shared bed has remained warm. The stone waits near your feet, no longer painfully hot, now releasing a slow and comforting heat. Outside, wind presses against the walls above. Snow rests heavily on the roof. Inside, the hearth settles into embers while small reservoirs of warmth glow invisibly beneath blankets across the room. Yet stones cool, water cools, bodies cool. To keep that hard-won heat from escaping before morning, the household must depend on every quilt, blanket, robe, and skin it owns. To keep that hard-won heat from escaping before morning, the household gathers every useful covering it owns and builds a small layered landscape over the bed. A wool blanket comes first. You lift it from a wooden chest and feel its weight settle across your arms. The fabric is coarse, dense, and faintly oily from the natural qualities of the wool. It carries the mixed scent of smoke, cedar, stored herbs, and long use. When you spread it over the mattress, it falls heavily rather than floating, pressing the warm air closer to the sleepers below. Wool is valuable because it continues to insulate even when it holds some moisture. It traps air between its fibers and slows the escape of body heat. In a cabin where dampness creeps through walls and clothing rarely dries completely, that makes wool especially useful. You smooth the blanket over several pairs of shoulders. The child in the middle disappears almost entirely beneath it. Only the edge of a sleeping cap remains visible. Someone near the wall pulls the covering higher, while the person at the foot complains that the lower edge has already begun its nightly journey upward. A second blanket is added crosswise. This is not carelessness. Placing coverings in different directions can reduce gaps along the sides. One blanket reaches the feet, another protects shoulders. A folded coat covers the lower legs. A shawl fills a narrow opening where cold air keeps finding its way beneath the pile. The result has no elegant symmetry. It looks like the household has been buried beneath the contents of a travelling cart. Still, each layer traps another pocket of warmth. In many early households, blankets represented considerable labour and expense. Wool had to be raised, washed, carded, spun, woven, fulled, and finished before it became useful bedding. A single large cover might embody weeks of work spread across many hands and seasons. That fact changes the way you handle it. You do not drag a good blanket across a muddy floor. You do not cut it casually. You mend holes before they widen. When moths appear, you act quickly. When a visitor receives the best blanket, the gesture carries meaning. Textiles are wealth that can be folded. They may serve as bedding at night, wraps during travel, curtains against drafts, padding in a wagon, or emergency clothing during a storm. A blanket is rarely only a blanket. Quilts offer a different kind of protection. You pick one up from the chest and examine its surface in the firelight. Pieces of worn cloth form a pattern across the top. Some sections once belonged to shirts, dresses, aprons, or children's garments. Beneath the patchwork lies a layer of filling held in place by rows of stitching. The quilt feels lighter than the wool blanket, but softer against the skin. Its filling may include wool, cotton, old fabric, or whatever suitable material the maker could spare. Quilting was both practical and social. Women often gathered to stitch large covers stretched across frames, sharing labour, food, conversation, news, and criticism delivered with exceptional politeness. A finished quilt could mark marriage, migration, inheritance, friendship, or community belonging. Yet not every settler owned one, and not every quilt displayed complex decorative patterns. Many were simple, sturdy objects made to be used until the fabric thinned beyond repair. A less familiar detail is that some quilts contained tiny scraps so carefully reused that pieces of printed cloth no larger than a fingertip still carried fragments of flowers, letters, or stripes from earlier garments. A sleeper might lie beneath decades of family clothing without consciously knowing whose sleeve or pocket rested above the heart. The quilt goes over the wool. You press down gently and feel warmth gathering beneath your palm. In another region, the household may rely on woven coverlets. These are patterned bed covers made on looms, often from wool, linen, cotton, or mixed fibres. Their geometric designs brighten dark interiors and advertise the skill of the weaver. Colour matters in a room dominated by brown timber, grey smoke, white snow, and black iron. A red stripe or blue pattern becomes more than decoration. It brings visual warmth even before the cloth touches the bed. Researchers continue to differ over how decorative ordinary bedding truly was in remote settlements. Since museum collections preserve prized examples far more often than plain, heavily worn covers, the beautiful quilt behind glass may represent exceptional work. While thousands of simple blankets vanish through use, rot, fire, or repeated cutting and repair, the past survives unevenly. Objects admired by descendants are kept. Objects worn through during desperate winters tend to disappear. You turn toward a pile of animal skins near the wall: deer hide, sheepskin, buffalo robe, bearskin, or fur from smaller animals may provide another layer. Depending on region, trade, hunting, and cultural knowledge, fur traps air close to the body. Hide blocks wind. A robe placed with the fur inward feels different from one placed with the hair outward, and experienced users know how to arrange it for particular conditions. Across northern North America, buffalo robes became important items of warmth and trade. Indigenous peoples developed expert methods for preparing hides, using them for clothing, shelter, bedding, and transport. Settlers and traders relied heavily on this knowledge and on exchange networks that existed long before frontier cabins appeared. You draw a heavy robe across the foot of the bed. Its weight is comforting at first, though too many heavy coverings can press uncomfortably on the feet and chest. Warmth does not always increase simply because more objects are piled above you. Loft matters, dryness matters, trapped air matters. A thick but damp hide may feel colder than a lighter dry blanket. The family inspects coverings carefully. Wet snow is brushed away before it melts. Skins are aired when weather permits. Wool is shaken and hung near warmth, though not so close that fibres scorch. Quilts are folded during the day to protect them from dirt and sparks. Storage creates its own problems. Moths and other insects feed on natural fibres. Mice chew cloth for nesting. Damp produces mildew. Smoke stains fabric. Food odours attract pests. Cedar wood and strong herbs may be placed in chests in hopes of protecting valuable textiles. Some households use lavender, rosemary, southernwood, or tansy among stored blankets. Whether these plants defeat determined insects is uncertain, but they make opening the chest a more pleasant experience. You lean closer and catch a faint herbal sweetness beneath the smoke. Trade and wealth shape every layer on the bed. A prosperous family may own imported blankets, fine linen sheets, multiple feather beds, and patterned coverlets. A poorer household combines homespun wool, old clothing, sacks, hides, and patched quilts. Newly arrived settlers may possess good textiles brought from elsewhere, only to watch them wear out faster than replacements can be made. A blanket may travel across an ocean, then across mountains, then spend 20 winters covering children in a cabin. Eventually it's cut into smaller pieces. One section becomes a baby wrap, another patches a coat. Frayed edges become strips for sealing windows. Nothing disappears until it has been reduced almost to thread. You settle beneath the full weight of the bedding. Closest to your body lies linen or rough cloth. Above it rests wool. Then comes the quilt. A robe protects the feet. Coats lie across the coldest edge. The layers feel heavy, but the air beneath them is finally warm enough for your muscles to loosen. The heated stone near your toes continues to release a gentle warmth. Someone beside you sighs. Across the room, another sleeper pulls a skin over a narrow pallet. A child receives a small quilt folded twice. The older woman near the wall has a shawl tucked around her shoulders and a wool cover pressed closely along her side. The distribution of bedding reveals the household's priorities. The youngest receive softness. The sick receive extra warmth. Guests may receive the best visible blanket even when the family quietly adds old coats to its own bed. Pride and generosity survive even where resources are thin. Outside, the storm continues to push snow against the walls. Inside, trade, labour, hunting, weaving, memory, and repair all rest above your body in warm layers. Yet nearby, a baby begins to stir, and the adults listen at once, because the smallest sleepers require far more than another blanket to survive the winter night. The baby begins to stir, and every adult in the room hears it before the sound becomes a cry. You remain beneath the blankets while a woman rises from the bed beside the wall. She moves carefully, stepping around boots, a stool, and the sleeping dog. The fire has fallen low again, so the room beyond the bedding feels painfully cold. The baby lies in a small cradle near the hearth. Its wooden sides are high enough to create a sheltered pocket, though not so high that air cannot move freely. A cloth canopy hangs above one end, reducing the draft that slips down from the roof. Inside, layers of linen, wool, and soft moss surround the child. Infant care during severe winters required constant attention because babies lose body heat more quickly than adults. Their small bodies have less mass, their skin is delicate, and they cannot explain that their feet are numb or that damp cloth has turned cold beneath them. The woman places a hand against the baby's chest. She does not trust the temperature of the hands alone. Tiny fingers often feel cool even when the body remains warm. She checks the neck, the breathing, the colour of the skin, and the dryness of the bedding. The child makes a soft, complaining sound. You hear cloth rustle as the coverings are adjusted. One layer comes away damp and is replaced with a dry piece warmed near the fire. The change must be quick. Exposing a baby to cold air for too long can undo the warmth gathered beneath the blankets. In many households, infants were wrapped in bands or long cloths intended to support the body and keep limbs secure. Swaddling customs varied widely by time and place, but the basic idea of wrapping a baby closely offered warmth as well as restraint. To modern eyes, some historical swaddling appears remarkably firm. The baby might resemble a very small parcel prepared for careful delivery, yet loose clothing was difficult to manage, and snug wrapping helped keep layers in place. A curious material used by some northern communities was dried sphagnum moss. It could absorb moisture, provide softness, and help insulate infants when placed inside cradle bedding. Indigenous knowledge of preparing and changing moss made it a practical resource long before manufactured absorbent materials existed. The moss had to be gathered, cleaned, dried, and stored properly, used carelessly. It could bring dirt or dampness close to the skin. Used well, it reduced wetness and kept the baby more comfortable through long hours. You watch as a small bundle of fresh material is taken from a cloth bag near the cradle. Nothing in this room is effortless. Even the softest bedding begins with gathering, drying, sewing, washing, carrying, and planning. A cold night rewards the household that prepared during warmer months. The baby is lifted against the woman's chest. Body warmth works more gently than a heated stone and carries far less risk of burns. The child settles beneath her shawl while she sits near the embers. Her own clothing surrounds both bodies, forming a warm enclosed space. A feeding follows. Whether the child nurses directly or receives another form of nourishment depends on the family and circumstance. But warmth and food remain closely connected. A hungry baby cannot maintain body temperature as effectively. A sick or weak child may become cold even beneath heavy coverings. You hear slow swallowing, then silence. The household relaxes slightly. Older children present different challenges. Several sleep in the trundle bed near the floor, where cold air gathers first. They're wrapped together beneath a quilt, feet overlapping, caps tilted at odd angles. One child has kicked free of the covering. An adult notices and pulls it back into place. Children move constantly in sleep. They push blankets aside, roll toward walls, lie sideways across siblings, and somehow place one bare foot in the coldest possible location. Parents wake repeatedly to correct these small disasters. The youngest may sleep closest to adults, where warmth and supervision are greatest. Older children share beds or pallets. A responsible child might be expected to tend the fire, comfort a sibling, or call for help if someone begins coughing badly. Childhood does not remove winter duties. It merely adjusts their size. One established feature of household life was that children often contributed to fuel gathering. They collected chips, bark, twigs, and fallen branches that could start or revive a fire. Their work mattered because large logs were useless if no dry kindling remained to make them burn. You remember the children gathering wood scraps while the cabin walls rose. Those little curls of timber now sit in a basket beside the hearth, ready for the coldest part of the night. A girl wakes and notices the weak glow. She slips from the trundle bed, adds several chips, and waits until a small flame appears. Then she places a thin stick above it. Her movements are slow with sleep, but familiar. Soon the fire breathes again. The returning light shows her face, serious and pale beneath a wool cap. She cannot be more than 8 or 9 years old. Yet the household trusts her with a task that protects everyone. Researchers still differ in their interpretations of how much responsibility frontier children carried at night. Since memoirs written later in life sometimes portray hardship with pride or nostalgia, some recollections may soften fear and exhaustion. Others may emphasize suffering to show how far the family later rose. What remains clear is that children worked. They carried water, watched younger siblings, gathered fuel, helped prepare food, and learned early to recognize danger in weather and fire. Illness makes every winter night more uncertain. A child coughs from beneath the quilt. The sound is wet and deep enough to wake the mother again. She touches the forehead, listens to the breathing, and raises the child slightly with folded cloth. Cold itself does not create every illness, but cramped rooms, smoke, poor ventilation, limited food, and close contact help infections spread. Once one child becomes sick, shared beds and shared cups make isolation nearly impossible. The family may use warm broth, honey where available, herbal preparations, steam, chest rubs, or simply rest and careful watching. Medical help may be distant. Remedies depend on local tradition, community knowledge, and whatever ingredients remain in storage. Some treatments comfort more than they cure. A pot of water steams near the fire, herbs release a sharp scent into the room. The child is encouraged to sip slowly. Medical historians continue to examine how families combined European remedies, indigenous knowledge, household experience, and advice from local healers. The boundaries between these traditions were often less tidy than later accounts suggest. People borrowed what seemed useful. They also made mistakes. A remedy praised by one neighbour might be useless or harmful, yet doing nothing felt impossible when a child struggled to breathe. The adults listened through the darkness for any change. Breathing too fast, unusual silence, confusion, fever, or a body that will not warm demands attention. Sleep becomes shallow. One person rests while another watches. The baby returns to the cradle once the bedding is dry and warm. The woman lays the child on its back according to the custom she knows, then tucks the cloth securely along the sides. A warm brick rests near the cradle, but never against the baby. Its heat reaches the surrounding air indirectly. The distance is checked twice. Small sleepers cannot move away from danger. That is why every object near them must be managed carefully. You settle deeper beneath your own blankets and listen as the room quiets again. The children breathe in uneven rhythms. The infant gives one soft sigh. An adult remains awake near the fire, watching both flame and cradle. Outside, snow continues to gather. Inside, survival passes from one generation to the next through ordinary gestures. A blanket pulled higher, a damp cloth replaced, a cup held steady, a fire revived before it dies. Then the wind changes. It strikes the roof with sudden force, and snow scrapes hard against the door. The latch trembles, somewhere beyond the walls. The clearing begins to disappear beneath a storm powerful enough to bury the path by morning. Somewhere beyond the walls. The clearing begins to disappear beneath a storm powerful enough to bury the path by morning. The first warning is not the snow itself. It is the change in sound. The steady wind that has pressed against the cabin for hours suddenly deepens into a broad rushing roar. The roof answers with a long wooden groan. Loose powder strikes the shutters in waves, no longer brushing them gently but rattling against the boards like handfuls of dry grain. You lie still beneath the blankets and listen. Another gust arrives. The door pulls against its latch. A thin line of cold air slips around the frame and travels across the floor. The flame in the hearth bends sharply. brightens for a moment, then shrinks as the draft changes direction. Everyone is awake now, even those pretending otherwise. The adult nearest the fire rises first. A coat is pulled over sleep clothes. Boots are forced onto feet before the leather stiffens further. Someone checks the chimney. Someone else presses folded cloth more tightly around the door. The storm has transformed the cabin into a vessel surrounded by moving white darkness. Blizzards become dangerous not only because of low temperatures, but because strong wind drives snow, destroys visibility, blocks roads, and makes even familiar ground impossible to recognize. A barn standing only a short distance from the house can vanish completely from sight. You look through a narrow gap in the shutter. There is nothing outside, no trees, no fence, no shed, only snow racing sideways through blackness. A person stepping beyond the door might turn around and fail to see the light of the cabin. Tracks disappear almost as soon as they form. Direction becomes uncertain. Sound carries strangely, sometimes seeming near when it is distant and distant when it is near. The household has prepared for this possibility. A rope may be fixed between the cabin and the barn, allowing someone to follow it through a whiteout. Without such a guide, a routine trip to feed animals or bring in fuel can become deadly. The rope must be checked before the worst weather arrives. Trying to secure it now would rather defeat the purpose. One curious practice involved stretching guide ropes between important buildings during severe winters. A person could grip the line and move hand over hand through blowing snow, reaching a structure that remained completely invisible. It is a sensible method, though the image of disappearing into a storm while attached to home by a single rope feels less comforting than the instructions suggest. The animals still need attention. Cattle, horses, sheep, pigs, and poultry cannot simply wait for pleasant weather. They require feed, water, shelter, and ventilation. A blocked doorway may trap them inside. A damaged roof may expose them. A frightened animal can injure itself or others. Yet leaving the cabin now carries serious risk. The family listens for sounds from the barn through the storm. Almost nothing reaches them. Wind overwhelms every smaller noise. The chimney draws badly. Snow may be collecting round its opening, or wind may be forcing air downward. Smoke curls into the room and thickens beneath the rafters. Eyes begin to sting. The door cannot be opened for long, so the household must balance ventilation against heat loss. A person takes a long pole and strikes carefully near the chimney opening from below. Soot falls in a dark sprinkle. The fire responds with a low rush as the draft briefly improves. Block chimneys are dangerous for several reasons. Smoke can fill the room, sparks can lodge in accumulated soot, and dangerous fumes may build without a dramatic warning. Settlers may not name every gas involved, but they recognize headache, dizziness, nausea, and unusual sleepiness as signs that the air is wrong. Sleepiness in such a moment is not peaceful. It is a warning. The door has another problem. Snow is piling against its outer side. Each gust pushes more into the sheltered pocket beside the cabin. The drift rises from the threshold, packing tightly under its own weight. By dawn, the door may open only a few inches or not at all. Some homes include an inward opening door for exactly this reason. Snow pressing from outside cannot prevent it from moving inward, though the drift may still pour into the room once the latch is released. Other buildings have doors that open outward and become firmly sealed by weather. You test the latch. The door moves slightly, then stops against the weight beyond it. A narrow gap opens at the bottom, and fine snow spills across the floor like flour. The door is shut again quickly. Cloth is pressed back around the frame. You are not trapped yet. Still, the thought remains, if the cabin becomes buried, air vents and chimney openings must stay clear. Firewood stored outside may become unreachable. Water may be limited. An emergency exit through a window or roof opening could be necessary. Weather historians continue to disagree about the reliability of later accounts describing cabins entirely covered by snow. Since memoirs sometimes compress several storms into one unforgettable event, even so, deep drifting around structures is physically plausible, especially where wind sweeps across open land and piles snow against walls, fences, and roofs. The roof now carries a growing burden. Dry powder is relatively light, but wind packs it into dense layers. If the temperature rises slightly, snow may absorb moisture and become much heavier. Rafters that held comfortably in the afternoon begin to complain after midnight. A sharp crack comes from above. Every face turns upward. Dust falls from one beam. Nobody moves for several breaths. Then the timber settles with a low creak rather than breaking. A support post is placed beneath the most strained section. Its base rests on a flat stone so it will not sink into the packed floor. The post looks crude, but it may transfer enough weight to prevent collapse. You remember how carefully the rafters were chosen, how the roof pitch was planned, and how every shortcut returns for inspection during the worst possible night. Someone suggests clearing the roof. Nobody likes the idea. Climbing outside in darkness and violent wind would be extremely dangerous. Pushing snow from below could damage shingles or sod, yet allowing the load to increase may be worse. The household decides to wait and listen. This is not passivity. It is judgment under uncertainty. The fire is fed sparingly. A strong blaze may create sparks while the chimney behaves badly. A weak one allows the room to cool. The adults choose steady coals and small flames, checking the smoke often. Snow begins entering through a tiny opening near the roof ridge. It falls in a thin stream, forming a pale mound on the floor. A bowl is placed beneath it. The solution is almost comically domestic. The sky is attempting to enter the house, and someone responds with cookware. You pull the blankets closer. The children remain together in the warmest bed. The baby is moved farther from the wall. Coats are hung near the door to block drafts. A bucket of water stands near the hearth in case sparks escape, though a skin of ice is already forming along its edge. Beyond the cabin, the settlement has vanished into silence. No cart passes, no voice calls, no distant axe strikes wood. The storm isolates each household as completely as an island at sea. Neighbours may live only a short walk away, but reaching them is impossible if a roof fails, a fire spreads, or someone becomes ill. Help may not come until the wind weakens. Isolation changes the feeling of every sound. A knock against the wall might be a loose shutter, a branch, or drifting debris. A cry outside might be an animal, wind through timber, or imagination. The mind searches for patterns because darkness provides so little certainty. You sit near the hearth with the others, wrapped in wool and listening. Hours pass without clear measure. The snow continues pressing against the door. The roof continues holding. The chimney continues breathing just well enough. Each ordinary success becomes precious. At last. The wind pauses for a few seconds. The silence is enormous. Then the storm returns. But its force seems slightly weaker. You do not celebrate yet. Morning may reveal blocked doors, buried fuel, damaged outbuildings, and animals waiting in cold darkness. Before daylight comes, someone will still need to rise, cross the room, tend the fire, inspect the roof, and perhaps venture outside along that narrow rope. Before daylight comes, someone must rise, cross the room, tend the fire, inspect the roof, and perhaps venture outside along that narrow rope. Tonight, that someone is you. The blankets resist as you push them aside. Warm air escapes at once, replaced by a cold that seems to settle directly against your skin. The heated stone near your feet has faded to lukewarm. Your stockings feel dry, but the floor beneath them is bitter. You sit upright slowly. Around you, the household remains quiet. A child breathes through an open mouth. The baby makes a soft sound in the cradle, then settles again, near the hearth. The dog lifts its head and watches you with the calm expectation that you will handle whatever foolish task requires leaving the bed. You pull on your coat. The wool is stiff at the shoulders, still faintly damp from yesterday. Your boots wait near the fire. They are not frozen, which feels like a small victory. Even so, the leather is cold and stubborn as you work your feet inside. The first duty is the fire. Only a red glow remains beneath the ash. You kneel close and uncover the coals with an iron poker. A few embers brighten as air reaches them. You add dry chips, then a twist of bark, then thin sticks. For several moments, nothing happens. You lean nearer and blow gently. Ash lifts into your face. Then a tiny flame appears. It crawls along the bark, touches the kindling, and rises with a faint crackle. You add one larger piece of wood, careful not to crush the new flame beneath its weight. Night tending of the hearth was a routine necessity in many cold households. Fires were often banked before sleep, then revived during the night or at dawn, if every ember died. Relighting could demand flint, steel, tinder, patience, and fingers steady enough to work in deep cold. Losing the fire did not always mean disaster, but it created inconvenience at the exact hour when inconvenience felt most severe. A household without a living ember might send someone to a neighbour for coals, carrying them in a covered container. During a storm, that option disappears. Your small flame is therefore more than comfort. It is continuity. The room slowly brightens. You check the chimney. Smoke rises, though the draught remains uneven. The roof support placed earlier is still straight. No fresh dust lies beneath the strained beam. Snow continues tapping above, but the frightening cracks have stopped. Next comes water. The bucket near the wall is frozen across the top. You break the thin ice with a wooden spoon and lift it out in one pale sheet. The water beneath is painfully cold. Some is poured into a pot and set near the fire. Fetching fresh water would require going outside, reaching a well, stream, spring, or pump, then returning with a heavy container through drifting snow. In severe weather, families conserve what remains indoors and melt snow when necessary. Melting snow seems simple until you try it. A large pot of loose snow produces surprisingly little water because most of its volume is air. More must be added again and again. The process consumes fuel, and clean snow must be chosen carefully. Snow gathered near paths, roofs, animals, or chimneys may contain dirt, soot, or less poetic additions. One odd winter habit involved keeping a lump of ice or a bucket of snow indoors to melt gradually near the hearth. It saved a trip outside, though it also cooled the room and left puddles wherever the container leaked. You glanced toward the door. The drift beyond it has grown heavier. The latch moves, but the door opens only a narrow distance. Snow presses through the gap and forms a small ridge on the floor. The barn must still be checked. Animals generate warmth in enclosed spaces, but they require air. A tightly sealed barn can become damp and unhealthy. Water troughs freeze. Feed may become inaccessible. A frightened horse might kick through a partition. A cow preparing to calve does not consult the weather before beginning. You wrap a scarf around your face and pull on mittens. A lantern is lit from the hearth. Its flame flickers inside a protected frame. You secure the rope around one wrist, then open the door just wide enough to squeeze outside. The storm meets you immediately. Wind presses against your chest and tears warmth from every exposed surface. Snow strikes your eyes like fine grit. The lantern illuminates only a small circle of whiteness before you. You grip the guide rope, hand over hand. You move away from the cabin. The ground is uneven beneath the drift. Familiar steps have vanished. A buried stump catches your boot and nearly brings you down. The rope keeps your direction true, only a few yards from the house. You turn your head. The cabin is gone. Its light has disappeared behind blowing snow. This is why settlers feared short journeys during blizzards. People could become disoriented within sight of their own buildings. Cold weakened judgment, and panic encouraged faster breathing, wasted movement, and poor choices. Accounts from northern settlements repeatedly describe travelers using fences, walls, ropes, tree lines, and other fixed guides to maintain direction in storms. You continue until your mitten strikes the barn door. Snow has gathered along its lower edge. You clear it with your boot and shoulder the door inward. Warm, heavy air surrounds you. The smell is immediate. Hay, manure, leather, damp wool, animal breath, and old wood combine into a dense atmosphere. Compared with the storm, it feels almost comforting. A horse stamps in its stall. Cattle shift and turn their heads toward the lantern. Their bodies release heat, and a faint mist rises from their backs. Chickens huddle together above the floor. You check the water. A crust of ice covers the trough. You break it with a wooden mallet and remove the pieces. The animals drink slowly once the surface opens. Feed comes next. Hay is pulled from a stack and divided among the stalls. Grain is measured carefully. Winter stores must last until spring, so generosity at midnight can become hunger in March. Agricultural specialists still dispute how consistently frontier families calculated fodder needs before winter, since surviving records show both careful planning and desperate shortages. Weather, livestock illness, theft, spoilage, and an unexpectedly long cold season could ruin even sensible estimates. The animals seem calm. No roof beams have shifted. No snow enters through the walls. A calf lies close to its mother. The horse's blanket is damp near one shoulder, so you adjust it and check the skin beneath. Then you hear a faint scraping outside the far wall. You freeze. It may be a branch. It may be packed snow sliding from the roof. It may be an animal seeking shelter. The sound comes again, then stops. You decide not to investigate beyond the building. Curiosity is valuable during daylight. At this hour, it is merely another way to become lost. Before leaving, you check for loose lantern flame near hay. Barn fires are especially dangerous because dry fodder ignites quickly. Animals panic, and water may be frozen. The lantern is closed securely. You return to the rope. The wind has shifted slightly, pulling at your coat from the side. The line feels stiff with ice. You follow it back, one hand after the other, until the cabin door emerges as a dark shape inside. Warmth seems stronger than before. The fire has caught fully. Someone else is awake now, holding the baby near the hearth. You remove your outer coat and brush snow from the sleeves. Meltwater darkens the floor. Your work is not finished. You refill the indoor wood stack from pieces stored beneath a covered lean beside the cabin. You check the door seal. You move the water pot closer to the flame. You listen to the coughing child and touch the forehead. Midnight chores prevent small problems from becoming morning disasters. A dying fire becomes frozen water. A frozen trough becomes thirsty livestock. A loose shutter becomes a room full of snow. A blocked chimney becomes poisonous air. Every task appears modest, but together they carry the household through the night. You finally remove your boots and return to the bed. The others shift to make room. Warmth closes around you again. Your feet ache as sensation returns. The dog settles near the hearth, satisfied that supervision has produced acceptable results. Outside, the storm weakens by degrees. Inside, the fire burns steadily. The animals are fed, the water is thawing, and the roof still holds. None of this has been achieved alone. Beyond the cabin walls lies a wider network of neighbours, shared customs, borrowed tools, local knowledge, and winter habits passed from one household to another. Beyond the cabin walls lies a wider network of neighbours, shared customs, borrowed tools, local knowledge, and winter habits passed from one household to another. You feel that network even while the storm keeps every building hidden. A fire burning steadily in this room may depend on wood cut with a neighbour's axe. The quilt over your shoulders may contain cloth exchanged between families. The rope leading to the barn may have been twisted during a communal workday. Even the shape of the roof may reflect advice offered by someone who survived worse winter years before. No household truly endures alone. When the weather clears, neighbours check one another quickly. Smoke from a chimney is reassuring. An untouched doorway, a collapsed shed, or silence from a nearby farm demands attention. People travel with shovels, food, fuel, medicine, and news. The help is practical rather than ceremonial. A family short of firewood receives split logs. A damaged roof gathers several workers. Livestock trapped behind drifts are dug free. A sick child may be carried by sled toward the nearest healer, while others tend the household left behind. Reciprocal labour was a familiar feature of rural life in many settlement regions. Communities gathered for barn raisings, harvests, quilting, wood cutting, road clearing, and other work too large or urgent for one family. These events were social as well as necessary. You imagine a wood-cutting day before winter. Axes strike in steady rhythm. Logs are dragged into piles. Older children gather branches. Food simmers in large pots. Neighbours exchange warnings about early frost, weak roofs, and the person who still has not repaired a chimney despite discussing it since spring. Gentle mockery is part of the service. Nobody wants to be the household remembered for setting the roof alight after ignoring 6 months of excellent advice. Shared labour creates reserves before crisis arrives. A widow, an injured worker, an elderly couple, or a newly arrived family may depend heavily on community assistance. In return, they offer what they can, perhaps sewing, food, childcare, knowledge, shelter, or future work. The exchange is rarely measured perfectly. It operates through memory, obligation, reputation, affection, and the quiet understanding that next winter may reverse everyone's fortunes. Seasonal customs also guide survival. Autumn is not merely a pleasant interval of coloured leaves, it is a countdown. Roofs are inspected, chinking is repaired, chimneys are cleaned, vegetables are stored, meat is preserved, grain is dried, blankets are aired, fuel is stacked above damp ground. Each task prevents a later emergency. A household that postpones preparation may discover the cost after roads close and temperatures fall. Yet even diligent families cannot control illness, failed crops, fire, livestock loss, or an unusually severe season. That uncertainty encourages sharing. One unusual community habit involved lending live coals between households. A person whose hearth had gone cold could carry glowing embers home in a covered metal or earthen container, packed with ash to slow burning. It was a humble form of borrowed fire, passed carefully from one doorway to another. You can picture the journey at dawn. A neighbour walks through snow carrying a faint red glow, moving slowly because dropping the container would be embarrassing, dangerous, and rather difficult to explain. Knowledge travels in much the same way. A new settler learns where snow gathers from someone who has watched the valley for years. A roof design is altered after one collapses. A particular wall mixture is abandoned because frost loosens it. A better method of drying boots spreads from family to family. Some of the most important knowledge comes from indigenous peoples whose communities have lived with local climates across generations. They understand seasonal movement, shelter placement, snow conditions, fuel, food storage, clothing, and the behavior of animals. They know which plants provide insulation, which woods burn well, how weather changes appear in clouds and wind, and how travel routes shift between seasons. Settlers may learn through trade, observation, friendship, intermarriage, cooperation, or necessity. They may also ignore, distort, exploit, or later claim that knowledge is their own. That uncomfortable truth remains part of the story. Ethnohistorians continue to examine how much settler winter survival depended on indigenous expertise, because written colonial records often minimize the people who provided guidance, supplies, routes, and techniques. Evidence suggests that adaptation was frequently less independent than later heroic narratives implied. The lonely cabin is a powerful image. It is not always an accurate one. You imagine being shown how to select dry standing wood after snow, how to layer hides, how to recognize unsafe river ice, or how to build a temporary shelter when caught away from home. Such instruction may save a life without ever entering an official diary. Local knowledge is often carried in gestures rather than books. Watch the trees, test the snow, keep the wind behind the shelter. Do not trust ice simply because it looks white. Carry more fuel than you think you need. Simple advice becomes profound when darkness falls early and the nearest roof is miles away. Community customs shape sleeping arrangements too. A storm-stranded traveller is offered space. A neighbour helping with a berth may remain overnight. Children may be sent to a safer or warmer household when illness, roof damage, or fuel shortage threatens their own home. Beds expand to include whoever needs shelter. You remember the crowded mattress, the shared blankets, and the stranger expected to keep politely to one side. Hospitality is not always comfortable, but in winter it can be the difference between inconvenience and tragedy. Religious gatherings, market days, work parties, and visits also spread information. People compare snowfall, fuel use, sickness, prices, and road conditions. A casual conversation beside a stove may reveal that a bridge is unsafe or that a family beyond the ridge has run out of meal. News moves slowly, yet it moves. Women's domestic networks are especially important, though older histories often gave them less attention. Knowledge about infant care, preserving food, treating illness, making bedding, repairing clothing, and managing scarce fuel passes through visits and shared labour. A quilt gathering may therefore protect future sleepers in more than one way. It produces a warm covering while allowing experienced hands to exchange advice. Which child recovered from fever, whose roof leaks, which herb soothed a cough, who needs help before the next storm? The conversation sounds ordinary, its consequences may be life-saving. Men share practical knowledge as well, often through construction, hunting, transport, woodcutting, and animal care. Children absorb everything by watching. They learn which neighbour owns a strong team, who keeps spare grain, which path remains passable, and where help can be found after dark. Even animals connect households. A borrowed horse hauls timber, a shared breeding animal strengthens herds, dogs carry scent and warning between properties. Livestock escaping through a broken fence may arrive at a neighbour's barn before anyone realises they are missing. Winter community is messy, informal, and sometimes argumentative. People quarrel over boundaries, debt, labour, religion, livestock, and who fail to return a tool. Cooperation does not require universal harmony. It requires recognition that survival often matters more than irritation. You can dislike a neighbour's opinions and still help repair that neighbour's roof before snow begins. You can complain about someone's noisy children while carrying soup to their sick household. Cold creates its own diplomacy. As the storm weakens, faint sounds begin to return from outside. A distant animal calls. Snow slides from part of the roof with a soft rushing thump, somewhere beyond the white clearing. Another chimney is probably releasing smoke into the grey morning. You cannot see the people there, but you know they are waking, checking fires, counting animals, opening doors, and listening for signs that others need help. The cabin around you remains small. The settlement around it is larger than it appears. It includes every borrowed tool, shared warning, remembered technique, offered bed, carried ember, and path broken through fresh snow. These connections do not remove the winter, they make it survivable. And now, as the first thin light gathers behind the shutter, the longest night begins to loosen its hold. The longest night begins to loosen its hold, not with sudden brightness, but with a subtle thinning of the darkness around the shutter. You notice it while lying beneath the layered blankets. The room is still dim, and the fire still glows more brightly than the window. Yet the blackness has softened into grey. Shapes return one by one. The table emerges. The water bucket appears beside the wall. Boots wait near the hearth, their leather dull with dried mud and smoke. Outside, the wind has fallen almost silent. The absence of its roar feels strange. For hours, the storm has filled every corner of your hearing. Now the cabin creaks gently in the quiet, as though settling after a long argument. Someone rises and lifts the shutter a fraction. Morning enters as a narrow band of pale light. The clearing has vanished beneath deep snow. Drifts curve against the cabin walls, smooth and untouched. Fence posts rise like short, dark fingers. The path to the barn is completely buried, though the guide rope remains visible in places, dipping into the white surface before appearing again. Smoke rises from the chimney more steadily now. It travels almost straight upward. That simple column of smoke tells you that the fiercest wind has passed. The household begins to wake. Blankets shift. Straw rustles. A child sits upright with a sleeping cap tilted over one ear. The baby stirs in the cradle. The dog stretches beside the hearth, yawns magnificently, and accepts full credit for everyone surviving the night. You pull on your boots and approach the door. It still resists. Snow is packed tightly against the outer side, so you open it inward as far as possible and begin clearing the threshold with a wooden shovel. Cold air enters, but it no longer strikes with last night's violence. Each scoop reveals another layer of compressed snow. You work slowly, pushing it into the room before tossing it outside through the growing opening. Soon there is enough space to squeeze through. The morning air feels sharp and clean. Your first breath carries the scent of snow, wood smoke, and pine. The sky is pale blue behind thinning clouds. Sunlight touches the highest branches, turning ice crystals briefly golden. You step into the drift. Snow reaches nearly to your knees. Every movement requires effort. Your boots sink, lift, and sink again. The quiet is so complete that you hear fabric brushing against your legs and snow compressing beneath your soles. This silence is one of winter's strangest gifts. After the storm, the landscape appears gentle, though danger has not disappeared. Roofs remain burdened, roads remain lost, hidden ice lies beneath the snow, fuel stores may be buried, animals still need water and feed. Survival continues after the dramatic part ends. A familiar historical reality is that winter mortality in early settlements often resulted from several pressures acting together rather than from cold alone. Poor nutrition, infection, exhaustion, damp housing, limited medical care, and isolation weakened people before extreme weather arrived. The cabin has not defeated nature. It has reduced exposure enough for human bodies and human cooperation to continue working. You follow the guide rope toward the barn in daylight. The distance appears almost laughably short. Last night it felt like a journey across an empty world. The barn roof still stands. Snow has gathered thickly along one side, but the main supports look sound inside. The animals greet you with low calls, impatient for breakfast and entirely uninterested in the emotional significance of dawn. You break fresh ice from the water trough. Hay is distributed. The horse nudges your shoulder while you work, perhaps offering affection, though more likely checking whether you're secretly made of grain. Outside again. You examine the settlement. A thin column of smoke rises beyond the trees. Then another appears farther along the ridge. Neighbours are waking. Before long, people will begin digging paths between homes. They will inspect roofs, count livestock, exchange news, and discover whose chimney failed, whose woodpile disappeared beneath a drift, and whose door opened into a wall of snow. One slightly peculiar winter custom involved using snow tunnels, when drifts became deep enough around houses and outbuildings. Children sometimes treated these passages as play spaces, while adults regarded them as practical routes that occasionally collapsed into collars, boots, and breakfast. The same snow that threatens movement can become a temporary wall against wind. Nothing in winter possesses only one character. Snow insulates and buries, fire warms and burns, smoke preserves and chokes, crowding comforts and spreads illness. The entire winter household survives through a careful balance of useful dangers. Researchers still debate the extent to which later stories transformed settler endurance into a simple tale of heroic independence. The evidence points instead toward dependence on family labour, neighbours, animals, trade, indigenous knowledge, stored food, suitable land, and a great deal of fortunate timing. The solitary pioneer makes a powerful statue. The real sleeper beneath the blankets is usually surrounded by other people. You return to the cabin with snow clinging to your trousers. Breakfast has begun. A pot hangs above the revived fire. Steam clouds its lid. The smell of grain fills the room, plain but comforting. Everyone eats slowly. Warm food reaches the stomach and spreads a sense of ease through the body. Bowls are held between both hands for heat. Children scrape every remaining spoonful. Nothing is wasted after a night that has shown how quickly ordinary supplies become precious. Daylight reveals marks left by the storm. A patch of chinking has loosened near the door. Moisture darkens one roof beam. Fine snow lies beneath the shutter. A blanket near the wall feels damp and must be dried. These are not failures. They are instructions for the next repair. Settler life depends on observing what nearly went wrong and correcting it before the next storm. The wall receives fresh clay. The roof gains another support. More fuel is stacked indoors. A better rope is stretched toward the barn. Each winter teaches the household how to survive the following one. You sit beside the hearth and look around the room. The bedstead still sags slightly in the middle. The straw mattress still rustles. The blankets remain patched and smoky. The warming stone rests cold beside the bed. None of these objects appears remarkable. Together, they carried sleeping bodies through bitter wind. The cabin's warmth came from logs chosen carefully, walls placed behind sheltering trees, cracks filled by muddy hands, rafters strong enough to bear snow, and embers preserved beneath ash. It came from dry stockings, wool caps, shared beds, heated bricks, heavy quilts, and children who knew when to wake and feed the fire. It came from neighbours carrying tools, women exchanging remedies, indigenous teachers sharing local knowledge, and travellers offering warnings from roads beyond the settlement. Most of all, it came from attention. Someone listened when the chimney changed its voice. Someone noticed when the baby grew cold. Someone checked the animals. Someone pulled the blanket back over a sleeping child. Through all those small acts, the household made it to dawn. Word count 11:58. The fire settles into a calm and steady glow as morning spreads across the snow. You no longer need to listen for every groan in the roof. The beams hold quietly above you. The door is open enough for light to enter, and the storm has moved beyond the trees, leaving only soft drifts and a sky slowly clearing toward blue. You let your shoulders loosen. The work of the night is finished, around you. The cabin feels warmer now, though perhaps the temperature has barely changed. Safety has its own warmth. Daylight softens the rough walls. Steam rises from the breakfast pot. A quilt hangs near the hearth, releasing the faint scent of wool, smoke, and dried herbs. You settle once more against the mattress. The straw gives a gentle whisper beneath you. Outside, a shovel moves through snow with a slow, measured scrape. Somewhere in the barn, a horse stamps once and becomes still, farther away. A neighbour calls across the clearing, their voice quiet in the bright winter air. Nothing needs to happen quickly now. The fire breathes, the cabin rests. Snow lies peacefully against the walls that held through the darkness. You can imagine every sleeper from the long night drifting back into comfort, wrapped beneath quilts, robes, coats, and shared warmth. Their breathing becomes even, their hands relax. The cold remains outside, where it belongs for a little while, and you may rest with them. Let the wind fade into the distance. Let the firelight soften behind your closed eyes. Let the rough timber walls become steady and quiet around you. While morning settles gently over the settlement, you are sheltered. You are warm enough, the longest night has passed, and now, with the snow shining softly beyond the shutter, you can finally allow yourself to drift into deep, peaceful sleep, sweet dreams.